All right, welcome to another week of All Politics Are Local, America's number one political hip hop streaming live show. And just we are here. It is the first, since it is the first, this is the third Friday. It is the Mayor's Forum with the Honorable Mayor Raz J. Baraka. Welcome. We have a good lineup tonight. We're going to be talking to, at 7 o'clock, we're going to be talking to, um, help me out because I have the thing right in front of me.
You got Gregg Zeff coming from the state conference of the New Jersey State Conference of the NAACP. Right. They're lifting up a fresh, renewed call to have federal intervention over the New Jersey State Police.
Right.
Can you imagine that? And he's going to update us on the case that was really ugly down in Trenton that didn't get a lot of play that it should have had. The case of JuJuan Henderson, brother who had a horrible ordeal with Trenton's jump out boys, wound up getting shot and paralyzed in front of his own home, and it was really a messy case. But they're trying to figure out how to mobilize some support on those two fronts. Gregg is one of our few people's lawyers out here, so we're looking forward to having him. I think it's going to be his first time with us.
Right.
It's good to have him aboard.
Okay. All right. Well, we are ready to get started with the Mayor's Forum. Welcome.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to be on with you guys, man. You know, there's a lot of stuff happening. I got to go to the family day meeting that we talked about. Actually on my way over in that direction. You know, we have men's meetings and they have women's meetings, and there's a few opportunities for us to come together and talk business and economics and family and community. And so that's what tonight is going to be about. We got two speakers that are going to be there. So I'll be okay. I'll come on after them. But at the end of the day, it should be a good meeting. You know, it's important for us to have, especially now. I mean, I think this month is men's mental health or something like that, you know, for us, which is incredibly important. You know, I just left Shani Baraka Center talking to a bunch of people over there about mental health and Black and brown men, and, you know, some of the barriers that we have in looking for help or seeking help or getting relief for the pressures that we are under in this place by design.
Right.
So then our very own, you know, our like inability to address it kind of adds to our issues.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, a lot of people a lot of people in our community definitely shy away from doing things to deal with stress and mental health. You have a lot of stress that you deal with on a daily basis. You do things to actually de-stress. What are some of the things that you do to deal with mental health in high pressure situations?
I don't know, brother. I continue to do the work that I do. I try to write poetry and go to, find a place that I need to go to, like travel or go to the studio and all kinds of things like that. And take care of myself in terms of like trying to be as physically fit as possible, you know.
You got a gym routine. I see you with your trainer. You got a gym routine. That's stuff.
Yeah. Trying to do that, you know, because that takes a lot of real stress off. And that's the problem, you know. There is like the kind of formal ways that people kind of address the kind of stress. Either we don't have access to it, or we don't make time for it, or, you know, it's kind of in and of itself adverse to the things that we are trying to accomplish. Even, you know, I went to this mental health event down in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and they were talking about Black men's mental health and the kind of things that we need to do. One, finding a kind of practitioner that's culturally relevant, you know, which is difficult to be able to do. That, like, number one, and find a place that you can continuously go to that helps you de-stress. That's difficult as well, you know, especially if you're around in this community and everywhere you go is stress, right? So, and you don't have money to be traveling to places all the time. So it's difficult, you know, to do that. one of the things that I thought was interesting, they said to volunteer or do service that has nothing to do with your job. So that's also important that you, I guess it gives you a sense of fulfillment that you're doing things for other people without any kind of obligation to do so. So community work is also a way to de-stress, which is important because a lot of folks do that, and they continuously do that, and that helps them, add years to their life.
Yeah, stepping out of those comfort zones. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I was getting at, one of the things that you said when you talked about poetry, when you talked about working out, it seems that we have to take time and space to care for ourselves. And even when you're talking about doing things in the community, right, you made a differentiation, right? It wasn't work. It was something that you would do that would be fulfilling to you outside of it. So even though it's, quote, altruistic, it can be healing to you, like volunteering in something that you love, knowing that you have done something to make the world a little bit better. At the end of the day, you did that. And I think that is, I think that's just an important part of the discussion to have, because often we talk about self-care as only therapy, when there are lots of different types of ways that we can be therapeutic with ourselves, from being that artist and the artistic outlet, the working out. I think that bringing all of those different things to the table, those things that are culturally relevant to us, like poetry, like a gym, or certain types of exercise fulfillment, right? So thank you for that, because that was
No. It's just me saying what I do. And other people can find other opportunities and ways to help themselves. But I think the reality is that people have to realize that that this place is heavy, and that you can't carry it by yourself.
Yeah.
And our definition of what manhood is, it kind of adds to our stress because it was designed in such a way that we can't reach it. Yeah. So it creates the kind of anger and that a lot of us feel all of the time. I was just telling them today that your joy and happiness is a radical act, and that you should seek happiness and joy against all odds, right? Because the number one thing they want to do is steal away your joy, your happiness, your imagination, and remind you over and over again of your position.
That's right.
And that in and of itself, makes you kind of act out like on yourself, right? So you walking around angry, and you think your anger is a part of your rebellion, when actually your anger is what they want to kind of disintegrate your mental state, your emotional state. Is actually joy. You should actually find joy and happiness in resisting. Right. That all of at the center of it, is about love. The fact that you love yourself, you love your family, you love your community, and out of all of the resistance that you're doing is emanating out of love, not out of anger, right? That consumes you, right? Because that's basically because that anger and that frustration causes the drug addiction, the alcoholism, all the other kind of things. Because like our young boys who are angry, they're always trying to find out a way to become a man or not be disrespected. And so they do all of these acts looking for manhood and looking for respect that they never find. Right. So those acts are continuous because they looking for things that just don't exist for them. And that's seeped into the definition of what manhood is. That was given to us, by the way, that is all centered around outside and material things. And what's interesting is that like nobody else can make you happy. You gotta be happy with yourself before you even experience happiness. And so that's and if you're in a country, in a place that is stealing your happiness, stealing your self-worth, stealing your self-respect, right? It's difficult for you to have joy. You can pretend like you're happy, but deep down, you feel a sense of inadequacy, right? And that's what, to me, leads to the kind of mental health issues and other problems that we have. Our inability to say we're sorry, we love each other, all these other kind of things, to like be vulnerable. All of those things are our resistance against those things is our attempt to have some kind of proximity to manhood, which is really proximity to whiteness. And so we try our best to do that. And while we're doing that, we are becoming a detriment to ourselves.
That was both very Fananian and very Father Baraka-ish. Your father, you know, they still taking your drums. You got to take them back. You know,
that's right.
And we got to do our thing. You know, we fight, but when we retreat, we got to do our thing. You know, we got to lift ourselves up. You know,
and that's important.
Yeah. Let me say this to you because I want to appreciate, and I want everybody to appreciate your creative side and how it comes out on the issue that we're talking about. Your book of poetry, Black Girls Learn Love Hard,
right,
needs some attention. And I'm saying that because what you're lifting up there, the theme of that particular creative endeavor of yours, speaks to everything else and how we are trying to implement that in the community and in the streets and in the institutions that we have control over. But that's, you know, they learn love hard because they're carrying so much from you know, Black men and not being able to address and take care of their mental health and their issues.
Right.
You know, on top of everything that's coming at us that doesn't want us to, that's trying to steal that joy. I just want to put that up for you.
That's real. I mean, there's always ebbs and flows, and people don't understand that. When there's advance and retreat, that you're not always advancing.
That's right.
In some places you're retreating, and that retreating is also a kind of tactical, a strategic act, right? People look at retreat as weakness, and sometimes retreat is actually a part of the larger plan and should be. Like there are times when you have to and need to retreat in order that you advance. Like if you don't retreat, it may be difficult for you to, or even impossible for you to advance.
Retreat to regenerate, retreat to recoup,
that's right.
To reassess, right? So you come back when you do advance again, you got your stuff together.
Right, absolutely. And those are all dialectics, really, because how would you know what right is if left didn't exist? Or if there was no down, there couldn't be up.
Yes, sir.
Because how would you define up if down didn't exist? Right? And that's the point of the dialectics of it. So at the end of the day, one depends on the other. Like you would not even know that you are, that what good was if evil wasn't around. Right. So at the end of the day, those things juxtapose. They live in the same space together, but you know they are designed almost to define one another. Like they can't live without each other. Those dialectics, and it's important when you begin to understand that. The kind of clarity that you have in kind of advancing struggle and you know, getting yourself together mentally and all these other things becomes a little bit more simple in terms of at least understanding it. Doing it is a whole nother issue, but at least understanding it is something else.
And in terms of understanding it, is it more like there's like all my life I had to fight, right? And we feel like we're always having to struggle, but understanding that there's struggle and peace, and they're both essential, and to some extent, there should be certain levels of joy in both.
Right, absolutely. That there can actually be peace in struggle. Like, so at the end of the day, like you should know that these things, there's going to be opposing forces always, right? And, you know, sometimes those things can exist mutually and sometimes they cannot, right? And one will overtake the other. Like the new overtakes the old, the young overtakes the old. I mean, that's just science, right? So it gives way to youth. So at the end of the day, you understand that struggle is a part of what you're going to be doing in the world versus one thing or the other. Right? And you put that in this perspective and understand that, you also have to have time for peace and rest, or there's no balance.
Right. Right.
And sickness exists when there is no balance.
Right.
Right. When things are out of balance, then, or they're not performing correctly, then this would create sickness, physical and emotional sickness, right? If there's no balance. People say you have a chemical imbalance or whatever. When there's imbalance in your organs and your systems, it creates problems, like in your thinking, all of those things. So you need to strive to have balance. That's important, right? It's important to do that. And I think one of the reasons that we can't really deal with our mental illness, Black men, is because we haven't defined why we are stressed in the first place.
Can you break that down?
Well,
Like
if we can't define what's going on, like why can't I have what everybody else has, right? Or why is it more difficult for me in my surroundings to achieve the things other people are achieving, or do things other people are doing, or reach this kind of pinnacle of manhood that they written on paper for us? Why is it difficult for me to get that, or to achieve these things? My self-actualization, like how do I feel and think about myself? We internalize it and think it's because of us, right?
So it's like, if you don't have an analysis of what's going on, if you don't have some level of a systemic analysis about why things are happening, something that gives some level of explanatory power, you internalize it, you think you're a failure, you think it's you.
Yeah. I mean, you just have clarity. That's it. People have to be clear. I don't think it's complicated for people to understand. I think, people know what it is, trying to identify the reasons that you're poor, that you're suffering, that you have these issues that you have in your community, why you can't get along with one another, or the other things that are happening to you. The kind of clarity that comes with consciousness, helps you to at least identify some things, and then to be honest with yourself and be retrospective about some of the issues that you have not dealt with, that even in your fight to change a system that has been heavy on you, to pretend that has not affected you is a problem, right? That it has affected you. It has affected all of us, right?
Right.
And so to kind of identify those things and begin to try to address those things is different, right? And people who know this stuff with a little consciousness at least have some awareness and or a head start even on other folks who do not, right? And but that's why I said understanding it and doing something about it are two different things. But there are people who don't even understand it, which drives them really up a wall. But when you begin to understand it, right, and you figure out how to cleanse yourself of it, those are two different acts, all together, and finding time and space to do those things, because they consume our time and take up our space with the things that they think will continuously keep us in the same place that we're at.
Mm-hmm.
But man, what you keep alluding to, and obviously we all agree, right, that this place is heavy. You also talked about vulnerability, and part of the problem is is being able to have a conversation, one where you can be vulnerable, but two where you can trust the listener, right?
Yeah.
Not to take that information when you're being vulnerable
And abuse it.
Use it right.
Right. Yeah, I was telling the like we was talking in there, I said, that's why we raise our Black boys in a certain kind of way. That's really counter to their own health. And we do that because they're in a place that's designed to humiliate, demean, and destroy them. And what we're trying to do is make sure that they're safe when we're not around.
Right.
So we try to build up these guys. We say, oh, we don't want you to be a punk. We don't want you to be soft and all these other kind of things. We try to take away their vulnerability. We remove their humanity to kind of try to deal with the inhumane treatment that they're going to undergo.
Right.
And we think that that's going to keep them alive. But what it really has done is marched us faster to death and to prison. And at the end of the day, I understand why people are doing that. Because, you know, if you grow up in these communities, in these places, everybody's trying to take advantage of you.
Right.
And so you're trying to raise a child
Right.
that people are not able to take advantage of. And I would submit to people that, you know, if children have information and education, if you build their mind and arm them with love and awareness, that they're going to find a way not to be taken advantage of.
Right.
You know, as opposed to, boy, get up, don't cry. What you crying for? That kind of stuff like that. That kind of makes men afraid to show weakness, to ask for help, or show themselves as weak in the definition of what weakness is in this context.
Sada calls that He-Man backwardness.
in this context. So that's really what it is. And so these people, they run around, they call it all kind of stuff. You know, we listen. I mean, I think like there's a liberal terminology, and these liberals have really taken over the whole kind of movement at this point. Like even this idea, like people that say of toxic masculinity, right? There's something specific about what's happened to us in this country that created that space for us in our community that we have to address directly. When you turn people into inanimate objects, into animals, you know, by law and by social design, to have them act other than that is a radical act. For people to break that is a radical act. That's why I say joy and happiness is a radical thing, because all the things that you experience are designed to not make you happy. So to find happiness is incredible. To be able to do that in poverty, in disease, in lack of healthy food, in toxic air, in the space, in confined space that you're in, because these describes these communities, right? With hypersensitive, hyper-violence, and all these other kind of things that are going on. To find happiness in a place that's designed to make you miserable, right? It has to be a deliberate and intentional act.
Yeah, I'm going to try it next week. I'm going to try and get the brothers from the Returning Citizens Group, right? Another space trying to figure out the importance of being a part of a trauma-informed group and community strategy, right? A whole pool of Black men, you know, who wound up inside much or most of their lives by virtue of the very dysfunction that we're talking about, right? And coming out and seeking spaces, having the sense, thankfully, to seek spaces that will allow them to address and heal from the toxicity that put them in them bad spots in the first place. In the first place, right? It's an important piece of those spaces that we've built up already in our community-based violence intervention network. That has to be built into that. I have been pushing some of the new organizations trying to figure out how to get involved, as to get them all in trauma to trust. Just like we're trying to get the whole police force in trauma to trust. Everybody claiming to help out in this front need to be trauma informed and understand how this thing goes, right? At minimum, that's a minimal space to begin the development of being trauma informed and to put some spaces together in a meaningful and intentional way to help us address the healing that we need to address.
That term trauma informed, that's part of city policy now, right? Like in terms of dealing with public health, the idea of being trauma informed is actually been fused with what we do in the city.
Absolutely, he's muted, but absolutely, yes.
Yep.
But let me ask you a question, man. Do you and I'm sure you do.
He had to. I guess he dropped off.
Yeah,
Um, but but break that down when you talked about. Oh, he's back. I was going to say break that
So,
down in terms of
so,
Ed. You were saying.
yeah. So, Mayor, what I wanted to ask is this, right? I know you know, right? This conversation is heavy, one, right? But to a lot of us, right, this is an embarrassing conversation, you know,
Right.
because we would have to admit that one, yeah, it's heavy, but then we'd have to admit some things about ourselves. And that's what always comes to, because, sometimes I get into a place and I say, who can I really talk to and really share some of the real shit that I'm dealing with, right? And it becomes a matter of trust with me. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Right.
You know,
That's why the person that I was at the workshop was like, that's the number one thing, to being able to find somebody that's culturally relevant that you can have a conversation with, that, because that's the number one thing, difficulty for Black men, to be able to be in a space with somebody, one, that they can trust, and two, that they can actually relate to, or they feel they can relate to the issues that they're dealing with. The difficulty of finding that room to be in, is a hard thing, though that is necessary. So just trying to figure that out.
Yeah, one of the things that I've also been trying to, in terms of this is a personal push that I'm trying to do with brothers, young and not so young, that have been through the paces of trauma and being just as impacted and whatnot, is to break, let your story be a full circle story, right? Because some of them will hit a wall when it comes to, like, well, why don't you go back to school, since you dropped out here, didn't go there? If you have a chance to, why don't you go back to school, and not just for some minimal stuff like a
Right.
GED, really go all the way, right? If you're living an example of what it means to have survived, the kind of trauma that we faced, and are now in a space where you're living another kind of lifestyle, why do we not have more Black men going into social work and psychology and whatnot, when we're the ones really, driving how that plays out with our problems in terms of, trouble behavior in the community, and our female practitioners get overwhelmed because this is not just simply not enough of us doing that. And so, there's, I definitely make this periodic call for brothers to go into the field, and not be afraid. If you wasn't afraid to do whatever you did that put you behind in prison, you shouldn't be afraid of this.
No, that's real. Yeah. I got to jump
one of
off, gentlemen. It's 6:30. Yeah.
Time has come.
All
Yeah.
right, well,
man,
All right.
thank you again.
thanks
Thank
for
you
the
again this week.
conversation, man.
A hell of
Got
a
it, man. Always a pleasure, man.
Hell of a conversation. Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
And let's continue this conversation, because we have this is actually an important shift, and I think that there's a great deal that can be explored. That, Zaid, you were talking. I was getting ready to ask the question on city policy and being trauma informed. You are very familiar with and work with many of these programs. Can you tell us what that means, and what that means in terms of mental health?
It means a lot of things. First, I want to just paint a picture for you to help understand that, again, because some of our folks get it and some of our folks don't, right? When we were shutting down city streets for 155 street,
And when you're talking about the Newark anti-violence,
the epic work of the mighty Newark Anti-Violence Coalition, we weren't doing that to be an end in it of itself. That was an interruption strategy, so we could put somebody like Raz in City Hall, right, with the support of City Council, so we can implement a trauma-informed strategy that actually deals with the question of violence first as a public health issue, right? And when you begin to look at violence as a public health issue from a public health strategy, you're dealing with something that goes well beyond the limitations of policing, good or bad, right? And you're giving pathways or creating pathways for people to address the kind of problems that generate violence, and give them a space to address those problems and to heal from those violence. So we've built up certain strategies and programs. He just left the Shani Baraka Center, right? Shani Baraka is as his sister who we lost in an incident of domestic violence, right? So that's one of the first arms of this community-based violence intervention ecosystem that addresses how that plays out in relationship to Black and brown women in this town, right? The mighty Newark Community Street Team, right? The safe passage, right? High risk intervention, going to and addressing those spaces where stuff pops off, right? With credible messengers, folks who have, quote, been there and done that and have now been trained in a public health stratagem in terms of violence intervention that allows them to do certain things and to speak to certain people and to put their hands in certain places where others without that, won't be effective, including the police, right? Our Trauma to Trust program that comes from Equal Justice USA that trains the police and the community together on what that looks like and makes the police address the trauma that the institution means to their community, even if they're, quote, good cops.
What do you mean by that? And is that implemented? Is that implemented in Newark?
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah.
What is Trauma to Trust? And it's been, and because I know you work in this, you're a part of the public health infrastructure, right? Like in terms of the work that you do. Talk to me. What does that mean, Trauma to Trust? And what is the nature of that?
Well, when you have bad policing, when you have abusive policing, when you have racist policing, when you have policing that is clueless when it comes to how to handle mental health crises, and then that's a whole lot of that going around, right? You have policing that will have a fundamentally bad relationship with the people it's supposed to serve, right? In communities that are properly invested in and that don't have large police forces, by the way, but have proper social investment, right? There is not a relationship of hostility between community and police. But when it comes to oppressed nationalities, oppressed communities, there is huge distrust because they have been their whole thing has been built on containing as opposed to relating and serving and protecting, but containing and controlling people who have been deemed at the very onset of the development of the system as a problem, as the other, as to be contained, as the violent, as the innately criminal, right? All those things were put on our ancestors as soon as them chains came off our behinds after our ancestors kicked them Confederates behinds and won the Civil War, right? All black codes, right? I mean, the whole apparatus of what we now call law enforcement was built on the containing of black people, of native folks, and immigrants of color like no other, right? So there is no trust, right? So as a part of a broader reform strategy, Trauma to Trust doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's a part. It's something that was an etc. was an extra original piece that adds to all the things that are happening with Newark's police reform piece that is happening under this federal consent decree. There are certain mandates that are happening that a court dictates from the consent decree. Trauma to Trust is a trauma-informed strategy that directly aims at making the police trauma-informed along with their community to address that long breach of trust that simply does not exist and cannot exist with that kind of paradigm and that kind of mentality. We do it seasonally. We just finished the spring season. We should be doing a fall season that should be organized, in the early days of the fall. It's an 18-week trauma informed training. It's in a community based presence. The objective on one side of the fence is to get the entire Newark Police Department trained in it. The other objective is to get as many genuine community voices trained in it. We developed a youth cohort to address particularly young people, that 16 to 21, 25 age group, the ones most often having negative contact with the police, and other spaces that we're looking to explore that need some attention on that front too. Like Ed, you'll appreciate this, like the role, the place of the courts, right? The place of prosecutors and public defenders, and how that that plays out in people trying to navigate through the system, and how going through the system like that in and of itself is a traumatic experience. So it's a loaded space. It's a very original space that is a particular tool of Equal Justice USA.
What's interesting is that as we think about everything that Black people in its totality in America that we have to scale, right? And Black women often, as we all know, Black women, in our families often end up being the ones who outlive us, and so therefore they end
The
up
ones carrying us.
yeah, you know what I mean. But it does become, in my mind, it really does become a matter of, who we can talk to, and then who we can trust, not to betray our trust, because we live in a country amongst people who have betrayed us, and we have betrayed each other.
That's right. That's right.
Right. I mean, you think about most major Black leaders, that most of them have been betrayed by a brother who was next to him.
That's right. That's right. That's
Right.
right.
And so
We got a list on that.
right. So when the mayor talks about it being heavy, and we talk, and then remember, we busy trying to compete not only with each other, but we compete with everybody else. And that's one of the reasons why when you listen to Dr. Smalls, when he says the mistake we make is as a people that somehow we always end up putting other people before us, right? And that's why he said he hate the term when we use Black and brown instead of saying Black people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because when we use that term, he says, we end up, or this system end up putting brown people ahead of Black people, and then we end up helping other people before we help our own people.
Yeah, putting anybody before us.
That's right. And so you look at the condition that we're in, right? And the condition we in is because, and if you listen to most of the leaders that are still here, the one thing we all hear is that our problem has everything to do with our lack of unity and trust for one another. And if you listen to what the mayor was just saying, right, he was saying that a lot of what's wrong with us is what we've been fed and what we continue to feed our boys.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. He used the proper. I use the Sada's term. He man backwardness that she used to use. Right. But what he described, the clinical term, is in fact toxic masculinity. I mean, you and I and Angela are talking about the whole question of addressing misogynoir, how that plays out with Black men and violence towards Black women, right? And how we need to have that conversation.
Yep.
So,
I think just to clarify, like I usually push back on the term toxic masculinity. It's a term that actually comes from the white men's movement of like the 70s. It was the literary movement, right? And in it is not talking about there are issues. I think that it is actually a theory that is the opposite of trauma-based theory, right? Like when you're dealing with a term like toxic masculinity, the basically predominantly white authors, like white lit theory, they're the people who came up with a lot of the ways and myths, like Star Wars, how they meet on certain things. They did believe that men needed to be more sensitive etc. But I would always press back on that terminology, because I think that there are some things that are really trauma informed. I think there's some things that have, like, often when people are acting in certain ways, it is because they have been traumatized in certain ways. And the concept of toxic masculinity, which is literary theory as opposed to social science theory, right? Because it comes from a literary discipline, is it assumes that masculinity in and of itself is toxic, as opposed to there are ways in which we traumatize one another or prepare people to deal with trauma from trauma, right? Like the ways in which we the reasons why, like, men and women can be, like, what you might say toxic, is because we're trying to protect people in the future, right? Like a lot of these behaviors that are taught aren't just like the men and women who teach these behaviors to young boys and young girls, right? They're not teaching them, they're teaching them out of a basis of trauma, of a basis of,
That's
I've
right.
been hurt, I don't want you to be hurt.
That's
If
right.
it's in the if the reason, so I usually push back against toxic masculinity because of the origin of the word, and because it really is just about saying masculinity in and of itself is toxic, right? As opposed to, there's a lot of trauma that informs the way in which we behave as men and women in this and within our society. And to be more specific, like Black men and Black women, right? Because I think that there are certain things that are particular to us that aren't really particular to others based on our history here, right? So I usually push back against that term because it is an all encompassing term that is rooted in white male literary theory. Um, and you can look this up in terms of its origins. I forget the name of the person who founded it, but he was responsible for a lot of a literary theory that looks at myths. That person was also talked about, like Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, etc. Right, in terms of the way that masculinity is traditionally defined. Um, so that's the only thing that I would push back on, to look at our theory. I just think needs to match our specific community and what we've gone through, and especially because I think that term may contradict the work that you're doing on being trauma informed, because because trauma informed understanding say that there is a root to it. It's not that your masculinity or your femininity is bad in and of itself. It is that when you are informed by, like, when you've been traumatized, hurt people, and you need to deal with the source of that trauma, right? So that's why I push
Not
back on.
bad, Mr. Jonathan. Not bad. The etymologist that was Malcolm X would love your root your root based analysis. But let me tell you this: one of the things that I want us to appreciate, and Newark is right in the heart of it, right, is that social work, social service along these lines is in the push to make it culturally informed, what Raz was just alluding to, right, is going through is reshaping, you know, those whole spaces of how mental health is taught and trained, right? How treating mental health is taught and trained. So toxic masculinity has that space that you're talking about, right? But in the but in a public health stratagem in a Black and brown community where there is a reimagining of public safety, it takes on a totally different kind of language and meaning that speaks exactly to your assessment as to where we're at and where we're going is right on point. And how that plays out. And one of the original terms that has emerged, that is beginning to get some resonance, is what I shared with y'all in terms of how that plays out with Black men vis-a-vis Black women in violence, is this term called misogynoir, right? You know, violence on Black women, for the most part coming from Black men by virtue of all the trauma and the mess that we're carrying and not addressing, you know?
I think also, just, and again, this, a lot of times I will push back and stop using certain terms only because, like, out of the white feminist movement like, and some of the academic, certain strains of academic Black feminism that may or may not be relevant because of where they are, right? Like I wouldn't say that like men are like Black men are rapists. Like this is a conversation I had with students, right? And a conversation I had with students is students and an adult. They were making the statement that Black men are rapists, as in like Black men equals rapist, or at least the overwhelming majority of them. And we're going back and forth, and like where they get like, why are you thinking this? And a lot of it is the internet, like the not either the some of the some series like Black Macho was a staple Black feminist book that had that as a conclusion, right? So I'm always pushing, and there's lots of various internet feminism that would push that as a conclusion. I'm saying that, and I'm trying to walk a real thin line on this, right?
Mhm.
As
I
in,
see you. I with you.
thin nuanced line in terms of taking out the things that are heteronormative, gender based, right? Because if you look at it, we know that gender.
You just dropped some big old words that most folks ain't never even heard of. Seen before. You want to break that down for our regular.
We know that, and I know that gender is on a continuum, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
as in there are some people like gender's not just a binary man, woman. Like there are people who are bisexual, the people who are trans. But there's a level of sexuality that's on a continuum.
Mm-hmm.
But yet we have a theory that talks about men and women as these finite things, and that is a Western construction, right? Like Native Americans had 5 genders. Most indigenous communities don't look at gender in the same way that Europeans do. So whenever I get like a theory that is rooted in a gender binary, like Black men do this, Black women do this, right? I always pull back a little bit because these things are complicated, and they also might make us ignore other traumas, like Black boys get raped by older Black women. That happens.
Yeah.
But we don't have a language to be able to actually articulate that if we're looking at it as toxic masculinity, right? We look at it as there's trauma within the community. These Black women who are raping these Black boys, there are issues that went around that we don't talk about. But we can't pretend that they're not related as well, right? Like there are levels of unhealed trauma among Black men within our community that we don't even have the language to address. And when we're talking, so it's not about, so the reason why I push back.
Therein lies where we're going.
Right.
So in this whole reimagining, there is going to be experimentation with language, refining of language, and ultimately the emergence at some point of new language.
Right.
It's very much a work in progress.
Right. And that's why part of my pushback is like, I think that the layers and the reasons why we have the dynamics that we have within our community are multiple and layered, right? And so there are some red flags for me for per se in that, right? And I know the way I'm using that, right? Like, and one would be, does the analysis that you have talk about like Black men do this and Black women do this, right? Is it saying is it purporting that it's biological? Now there are different ways that trauma affects us, but again, there's a lot of nuance that's lost in a lot of this language, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you deal? Well, how do you
put behind the trauma to trust? You would be great in that.
Well, I mean, but this is actually part of what we teach in debate. Mm-hmm. We debate these theories, right? So part of the reason why I even know about these theories is because we debate them all the time.
Right on.
So that's why we went to the term toxic masculinity. We just did a deep dive on it, and we looked at the origin.
That's healthy. Like, okay. That's healthy. Yes. Right.
And we looked at and
high school students talking about something like that. That is healthy as hell. Yes.
Right. And so we look at even the disconnect between something like academic feminism that is in the academy and things that Black women who are doing it based in the social sciences that are within the community, right? Like there's tension even there. So we always have to.
Yes.
So whenever you're doing this work, the work always has like nobody's above criticism, right? Ain't no theory above criticism. It's a theory, right? Needs to be vetted.
That's right.
And sometimes we get into these dogmas like, oh, you can't criticize Black feminism or you can't criticize feminism. But if it's a literary theory and is based to analyze literature and it comes out of literature departments, then it might not be good to make claims that are social science theories that make social science conclusions, right? So these are, especially in the work that you do, and when we're having this work, having these conversations, we need to not mix stuff up, right? Literary theories are cool, but the social science theories are the things that we actually need for the conclusions that we're trying to draw, right? Or at least that should be the discussion.
But here's the problem, John. If you listen to what the mayor is saying, right, the majority of the students you teach are not Black boys, right? And the mayor was alluding to us. He was alluding.
I was talking about Ed. I'm not talking about. I'm talking about what Zaid's talking about.
No. But if Zaid is saying this is heavy stuff for college, for high school students, this conversation, right? And most young Black boys don't have the ability to deal with what's wrong with them, or even have the opportunity to talk to someone like you, John, who can articulate, right, some of the things that they're dealing with and help them understand.
That's right.
Well, I think that.
So let me just finish this. So if you listen to what the mayor is saying is that, and you listen at what Zaid is saying, where we're coming from, right? The what we deal with on a daily basis, and then what we impart to, say, our young Black boys, we're trying to give them a certain kind of skill that would allow them to navigate the world and keep them from being hurt, right? But what it does is, John, is it gives them a false sense of hope, and then they begin to internalize their own pain, right? And the mayor used the word pretend, right? I didn't say that, he said. So what happens is that we all become pretenders, right? We're hurting, right? We got real issues.
We hard.
Right. And we're pretending, right? And so therefore, John, when we get into a relationship with a woman, right, even if we do venture into that place where we want to be honest and we want to be sincere, we become afraid that she may use that, right, in a whole nother space when we're trying to, be lovey-dovey or we're trying to be the leader. And then we got to go back in the world and we got to pretend to be something that we're not really, and we got to give the same thing to our kids. I see that in my own family, John.
But Ed, notice what you said, right? Like, if many males have expressed, right, that if they feel they open up to their woman, right, to someone they love, that they'll be rejected, that they'll be pushed back. That's, I mean, and at least anecdotally, I find that true. Many people talk about that. That's the reason why the fear exists, right? But you have also, right, you have men who feel vulnerable. You have women who don't allow them to feel vulnerable, right? Like, as in, the reason why they feel fear isn't for no reason. It's because often when they open up, they get shut down or thought of as less as men. I mean, it's not a single, it's not
or being a man that has too much for them to deal with. That's something that's happening.
Right. Like he's dude's a bitch. He's got too many feelings. He's all in his feelings, right? Like, these are common terms that we use to describe men who are sensitive, right? Or even a sensitive male. Like, a sensitive Black male is like, there's a very thin line between being a sensitive Black male and being a bitch, not just to men, but to women, right? Like, so when I'm saying that we're talking about
trauma-informed society, everybody needs some of that Kool-Aid.
Right. Like, let's not just teach your boys, it's teach the community, because these views are reinforced, right? Like, why they're common. I don't need a man. I can do, right? Like, there's all these things that are setting us against each other because we're acting out different different put upon gender norms that are really ultimately European gender norms, right? Like they're ultimately, and I think that's what the mayor was talking about as well. Like these things are ultimately based on gender binaries that are European. They're not even like, so a lot of these conflicts
That's
are
right.
conflicts that aren't really,
That's
that
right.
are because we don't know about ourselves,
That's
right?
right. That's
And
right.
that we are adopting like dominant modes of what masculinity and femininity are and should be. And I don't think that's a gender specific thing. I think that's a community thing. And I think often we need to start talking about these things as community.
Often and more often it's a racial thing, because what you're talking about,
Right. Yeah, I'm talking about,
it's real.
exactly. Because I'm assuming black in this, right? Like I'm assuming black, colonial, right? Like that's what I'm assuming in this. So when we talk about all these, the black men, often what I find in these conversations about black men this and black women that is that we're probably the same, as in we act the same way, except for their varying degrees of it. And there's some levels of like violence, even among black women, is higher, right, than in other communities, like disproportionately because of that trauma, right? Like, so, and I didn't fully realize this. And often, again, we don't necessarily talk about this, but beating your children, what is that? That's domestic violence. Stacey Patton talks a lot about that, right? In terms of what it means to beat your children. Are you actually instilling them in trauma? Stop teaching your boys. Stop beating your boys. Maybe that might help, right? But we don't want to talk about that. That's why I'm saying that sometimes when we like toxic, it's not just, even the term toxic masculinity makes it seem like we just need to teach boys differently. Maybe we need to treat boys differently. Maybe mothers and fathers need to treat boys differently.
I can agree with that, John, but I think that part of what has to happen with us is that we've got to throw out this Eurocentric way of thinking, right?
Right.
That's what's wrong with us, right? You know, and because we
call it the ghost of the double consciousness, leaning on the.
Oh, and just throw this in, beating is European. Beating your kids is European. Comes from slavery.
Because we're so damaged, man, because of what's been done to us, right? And so if you listen to what the mayor was saying, what he was trying to get at when he kept, and that's why I kept pulling him back when he kept saying this place is heavy, right? It is. And most of us won't admit that, right? We won't admit it. I mean, and Zaid alluded to the court, right? I mean, there's injustice in there that is very racial every day, right? I see black kids, who come in there being treated differently than white kids who come in there right through the public defender's office, and you see every day that they find a way to give those young white kids an opportunity to walk out of the
way and give the black kids the time.
But they don't find a way for them young black boys. They find a way, every way that they can, to lock them up, John. Right? And again, a lot of that has to do with, in my mind, right, has to do with us as older black men, right? And it is because what's going on with us in our own lives. And that's why what the mayor is saying is so important. That's why I kept saying that it's a heavy conversation, man.
Yeah.
Right? It's a very heavy conversation because most of us don't want to really be honest, right? Because we're afraid of how that might be used against us. But we need to find a safe space, and we need to find a place that we can go as brothers. But I think that in my mind, John and Zaid, we've got to get rid of that. We've got to get rid of that Eurocentric ideas about who we are, what we are. We've got to find our African mind.
What manhood is, what womanhood is. Yeah.
Well, and I would even go what parenting is.
What parenting is,
in,
what death is, what life and death is. Very basic stuff.
But I mean, Zaid, how many times have people you say like, stop beating your kids, it's Eurocentric. And people be like, it's silence. like, because they're like, teach black boys not to be violent. Well, maybe stop beating them and they might be less violent. Right? We don't necessarily get the direct relationship between the trauma that we inflict on boys and girls, right? In terms of violence, right? Because beating a child is domestic abuse. That's
But
Stacey
Patton. But you know what happens, John? We confuse beating with disciplining, right? So because what you hear from older black folks, and at least I've heard it, and I'm sure y'all heard it, y'all black like I am. Oh, I got my ass beat. Ain't nothing wrong with me.
Right.
And
And that is called passing down colonialism generationally. Right. They were right. Like they passed down the trauma, and they're like, nothing's wrong with me. They probably need therapy from getting their ass whipped from that, right?
They got their ass whipped a lot.
Right. And there's damage to that. Like again, I recommend people following the work of Stacey Patton.
Can we get her? When we get her on the show? That's somebody we need to get in the
absolutely.
Bringing
I've been trying.
out.
Right, like because she breaks it down so thoroughly, right? Like she says that basically, kids, they can't tell the difference between when you're beating them and when you're sexually abusing them. They take it the same way.
Wow,
they don't know the difference.
That's deep,
right? And both are abuse,
right? Sure. And they're too young, often to language. Right? We want them to act in a particular way that they can't understand. We think we're communicating, we're not. We think we're telling them what to do, and they should be hearing it with it's the same thing we always do in debate. There's a sender and a receiver. Often it's because we're not communicating.
Wait a second, John. Say that again. So when we're beating them,
young kids feel beatings the same way as sexual abuse. Wow. And it makes sense because when an older person, when you get beat, that's humiliation. Right. Violence is humiliation. We are trying to do behavioral control through pain and humiliation. There's no world where that makes sense. When you talk about it and you actually say it out loud, you're like, damn, that's messed up. Because it is. Right? It's tradition and culture that is actually wrong. Because all the social science goes one way on this, right? Everybody who studied beating, spanking, physical violence gets the results. When you hit somebody, it's a humiliation.
Right.
It's trauma.
Right.
It's domestic violence.
Yeah. That's deep, John, because you brought me back to undergrad. I remember when I was studying psychology in undergrad, and I remember this example that the professor was using. Right, he said, "How do you get your dog right to stop peeing right in his bed?" He said every time he pee in his bed, he said you beat him.
Damn.
Right, and then And then every time you walk in there, you see him pee, you beat him.
Damn.
Right? And so that, as I think about what you're saying, that's incredible because that's very European. And most of what has happened to us, when our parents say don't do something and you keep doing it, what happened? You get your ass beat.
Right. Right. And we wonder why there's dysfunction. I think that I really do think that we need to forefront this as an issue, right? We need to decolonize parenting, right? Because I see all these memes like teach your boys this, teach your boys this.
Wow.
Right. That's not my term. That's Stacey. Wow. Well, I think that's one of the title of Dr. Stacey Patton's book. Okay. It's instead of like you got to teach your boys to respect women. You got to teach your boys not to beat women. You need to not beat your boys because if you
all the above.
Right. If you beat your boy, if you are a black woman and you beat your boys, right? How you think they're going to treat black women? How do you think they're going to see black women?
Right.
Right. Like we had a person on the show who dealt directly with domestic violence, and she said a big, huge red flag. The thing that you need to pay attention to is how well does your prospective man have with his mother. If he hates his mother, he probably won't like you.
That's true. I believe that.
Stuff. The marriage, that's a mouthful.
Right. And so you don't think beating and humiliation and or even recognize beating as humiliation, right? Like, and it doesn't matter whether it comes from the mom or the mother or father, right? Or and you know, like it's a form of humiliation. Even if you think about like when people joke about Catholic schools, when Catholic schools used to be able to do corporal punishment, and people talk about the dysfunctional relationship, the love-hate, real psychological relationship people have with their Catholic schools and the Catholic Church, right? Because they beat them, but they love them. They beat you, but they love you. So what you're saying, if I love you, I'll beat you? Isn't that what people who beat women say? Isn't that what often women who are victims of domestic violence say? Like, he beats me, but he loves me. Where'd they learn that?
Yeah.
It's gonna hurt me more than it's gonna hurt you. I'm beating you, but I love you.
Yeah.
But no, you talk to this with parents who are like, no, I beat my son. I was beaten. They could be beaten. We pass it down. Yes, you're passing down trauma.
Yeah.
Haven't healed. Don't make no sense.
Yeah. And here's the problem, John. We're seeing the effects of that, right? Like on all these young boys, right? And even and you know, I mean, I can't leave myself out of it because I'm traumatized too, right? Because I think about my own reality in this world. You know, when I'm talking to certain people, and particularly when I talk to women, right? And when I talk to Black women, I'm always mindful of how I talk to them because I don't want to be misconstrued, right? I don't want them to think I'm being disrespectful. I don't want them
whose intentions are good. Yeah. Oh, Lord, don't let me be misunderstood.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And John, you know me personally. You know how I am, right? I'm, you know, so sometimes I just won't even say anything because I don't want to be misunderstood. And I don't know.
That's right. I know,
you know, exactly. and even, and y'all know this is true too, right? Y'all know that sometimes when we talk to our sisters, they, you know, because they've been traumatized, because they've had a lot of crazy shit in their lives, when you talk to them, they internalize all of that and they give it right back to you as though you the guy that did that to them.
Right. So here's the thing that doesn't, and again, this is why I don't use the term toxic masculinity, because I don't think it's helpful, because I think that we need to recognize we have a lot of toxicity within our community, right? It's not like, as in, brothers get cursed out. We are the victims of a whole lot of verbal violence and verbal abuse, get called every kind of bitch up and down.
Yep.
Right? Like, there's physical violence, right? Like there's one study that was a data set that switched in the 70s, but before like 1977, more Black men were killed by Black women. It switched in 1977, and it became a far more like Black women being killed by Black men. But one of the things that we hear the anecdotes, right? And even in my own family, we hear the anecdotes of, you know, a Black man who is either, he may be cheating, he may be doing something wrong, but he gets hot grease thrown on, right? He gets hot grease thrown on him, right? I have a family story like that, right? Where he had hot grease thrown on him. He had to be in the hospital for months, right? And she threw hot grease on him and left, right? He was cheating. He was cheating something terrible. So she committed. But if you reverse that, right? So people listen to like, he shouldn't have been cheating. But if you reverse that, like, cheating is not a justification for violence. If a woman's cheating, we don't go, she was cheating, she should have got beat. No, we don't say that, right? There's nothing in our mind that be like, it's acceptable to beat, to maim, to kill a woman because she cheated, right? But yet we don't necessarily get that level of clarity when it's a man, because there's violence there. We've got community issues of violence, both verbally and physically, that we have to address. The way that it comes out just most blatantly is in beating your children, right? Because little boys get beaten, little boys get raped. Little boys get raped by their mama's friends, right? And famous comedian on Blackish. He has his own show. He was giving an interview on Vlad TV, and he was talking about being raped by his mother's 30-year-old friend, but he's talking about it in joking terms because he can't really even recognize what it is. And Vlad TV, Vlad's just laughing, right? Like, and he's being real graphic in which in the specific way that he was raped and the specific way in which he can't perform with grown women now and how it impacts his relationship with women now, right?
You talking about Anthony Anderson?
No, not Anthony Anderson. The dude, he's on Blackish and Grownish. He has his own specials.
Okay.
If you Google him for me and and we'll get his name, but he literally is talking about, and it's not uncommon, right? A lot of rappers will talk about their first sexual experience being when they're 12, right? Like T.I. talks about his first sexual experience being when he's like 12 or something like that.
Right.
50 Cent did the same thing. Like a lot of, I mean, it is common for them to talk, but they talk about it like they're having a sexual experience at 12 with a 16, 17, 20, 25, 30-year-old, and they're not talking about it as rape, right? So there's not even the language to deal with what's happening to a lot of our boys that we don't have the language to deal with because we think they just need to be taught better. Stop beating our boys, stop raping our boys, maybe start recognizing this stuff is happening to them, right? Because the violence happens based on trauma. And I think that we're not giving that enough credit. So when you're talking about language, that's why, again, I don't use the term toxic masculinity. I think it masks violence. I think it makes us unable to actually understand the interrelated community nature of the violence that takes place.
You know, John, I think I'm saying we collectively as a people, right? I think we need a new level of or a new idea about what rite of passage is, right? Not only for boys but for men as well, right? Because we don't have that many elders around, and you think about the ones that are around, right? And when you think about, because like I was having this conversation recently with like a 70-year-old guy who's never been married. And this 70-year-old guy, right, was saying to me that, he wasn't using the term player, but the way he was IDing his life, going from one chick to another chick. And in my mind, I'm saying, this dude's a player to me. You know what I mean? He got 6 or 7 kids by different women and never been married. And, and I asked him, I said, well, is any of your sons married? He told me no. And so in my mind, I'm like, all you did was transfer that same behavior to all these boys that you fathered, and ain't none of them being responsible. You got grandkids, but none of these cats have been responsible. So marriage is not even a real ideal in some of our families anymore. Mm-hmm. I mean, think about that.
Mm-hmm. The actor's name is the comedian's name is Dion Cole.
Oh yeah, okay.
Young boy, right?
Yeah. I mean, youngish. Like he might be 40. He's like 40 now.
Oh, he's that all already? Okay.
Yeah, he's in his 40s. He's definitely in his 40s. He's 51 years old, actually.
And that dude on Vlad TV.
I know who you're talking about. Yes.
Dion Cole, right. He's a professional comedian.
Role. I'm thinking of the son. No, that's his boy. No. Yeah, at the office.
No. The older black male comedian.
He's got the Old Spice commercials and whatnot.
Right. He was being interviewed on Vlad TV, and it was all a joke, right? Like as in.
But it's not a joke.
No. But I mean, Vlad was joking.
And that guy Vlad is white.
Right. Vlad was joking like it was funny.
That's right.
Dion Cole was like, you could tell he was struggling with it. Because like it was an uncomfortable interview because he's opening up, right? And he's cracking jokes about the very explicit sexual things that were done to him.
Right.
But everybody outside oh my God, he's talking about being raped.
Look, I'm gonna tell y'all something that I don't talk about much. I can't remember the name of the flick, but it's Denzel Washington and Derek Luke.
Yep.
You remember the name of the flick?
Yeah, I'm still standing. I'm still here. It was the first movie that Denzel Washington directed.
No, that's not the title of it.
No, I mean, no, that was the line, right?
This is the flick where they're in the Navy.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, that was
Antoine
a dope movie.
Fisher.
Yeah,
That's
Fisher.
Antoine Fisher,
Yeah.
right? There are parallels to that in my own story, right?
Yeah.
There are parallels to that in my own story,
Hmm.
right? I had somebody when I was, that was supposed to be like my big sister figure that, it got wild,
Right.
right? And but the beauty of that story is that Antoine found a Denzel,
Right.
which is the point that I was trying to make. I'm trying to get brothers to go into the field, right? That have been through all those paces and have figured out that they have in fact endured trauma, right? And that trauma had a lot to do with the mistakes that they made,
Right.
and the trouble that they got into, and the relationships that they impaired, right? And that they're working through that thing. Why not go if you can go through all those crazy brave things that you did to be strong and tough that could put you behind inside, why can't you be brave enough to go ahead and come out on the other side as a healer?
Right.
Like Matulu Shakur.
And I think that
Right?
needs to
Shakur
be
wasn't nobody's fault.
right.
Right? Martial artist, and ultimately, went to prison being a part of our Black Liberation Army, but he was a healer.
Right.
Zaid, is that like the Scared Straight program that they have that was
No,
created by the brothers inside?
Scared Straight was I don't know if that quite fits that. And then it was, welcome to the conversation.
Hey, Donna.
Because
Hey,
one of the things that I appreciate that Donna tried to do with the show on this particular issue, when she brought William Barbie on, and we had that discussion with Barbie about the whole notion of men, trying to address their mental health, right? Scared Straight was, for folks who don't remember, it was a program that was done by lifers at Rawway Prison that was aimed at young men, at the beginning of going into the system on the streets, to take them into prison and to put them in spaces with brothers who had nothing to lose, who let them know what to expect in terms of getting their behinds dealt on in a place like prison, while they're trying to be dumb enough to break themselves into prison, to scare them straight, right? That's a program that has been modified a lot because some felt it gave too much power to those brothers inside, and some folks felt that some folks from a social science perspective felt that it was too hard, right? It exists in a very modified way still, but it's not at all on the level it was when it was once popular. And I can remember when it was once very, very popular.
and probably the yelling and screaming, but yet that's how some of the branches of the military consider breaking people down and building them up through basic training, standing
That's
over
right.
their shoulders, screaming, and da 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 da.
That's right.
Not every branch, but some of the branches.
So Donna, what we were talking about, we were carrying on a conversation
Mhm.
that the mayor started, and he was, talking about some of the trauma that, that we're dealing with as a people, and, particularly young Black men and men in general, and dealing with this heaviness, and, that we have to deal with and trying to navigate our lives. So we were just, carrying on the conversation. And obvious, it does bring us back to Michael Barbie in terms of what he was saying, because some of the terms the mayor was using, where he was talking about us being able to talk to certain people and have space to be vulnerable without being judged. And of course, John began to explain it from a whole nother perspective in terms of, when we're violent to young boys, how they can't necessarily internalize it, but they internalize that as some sort of sexual abuse, which is deep to me, because it's like
I'd never heard it like that. Yeah,
That's Dr. Stacy Patton's
that's the
analysis.
mic drop of the night.
Right. Like she basically was like, they don't they don't receive it the way we think they receive it, right? Like when you hit them and they're young kids, they can't tell the difference between you, like they don't know what beating, spanking, or sexual abuse. It's the same because it's violence, right? It's violence and humiliation. For young kids, they don't have the language for it, and for older kids, like it is humiliation because everybody remember, that the whole point is humiliation. It's pain. It's teaching through pain. It's like I'm beating you because I love you.
Yeah, yeah, I was saying we were talking about that. Remember your parents before the spanking would be like, "This is gonna hurt you more than it hurts me." You know that whole saying and everything.
Right. But it turns out it hurts the whole community.
Yeah.
People need to stop spanking their kids.
So
Yeah,
so 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 Donna, you know, and this might be a heavy question to ask you as a sister, but because I was saying this to the man, we were having this conversation. So how do like for me, and I can't speak for John and Zaid. I know sometimes because I've seen this in my own life with my father. I know that when I'm talking to certain sisters, if I feel like the conversation is going in a whole nother direction, I stop talking, right? Not because I don't think I have a valid point, but because I don't think that it's going in a healthy direction. And so for me, I stopped talking, right? And I tend to let other sisters get involved in the conversation to try to help out. I don't know if you remember Zaid. I think you might have been on this call with a sister who was on an organizing call, and we were having this conversation one night about what happened with Will Smith, right? When he went up and he slapped Chris Rock. And remember, were you on that call when that sister went off? She almost lost her mind, where she was saying that, about how Will was protecting, his
Right.
wife, and this whole thing about black women needing to be protected and all of that. And it went in a whole nother direction. So I guess the question I'm asking you, Donna, is and I'm not asking you to answer for all black women. I'm just saying you as a sister, how is it that brothers, right, can have a conversation with a sister, right? And I'm not saying that we're not traumatized. I'm saying have a conversation by which we don't necessarily have to agree, but we respect each other in the conversation to understand that both of us are fucked up.
you're asking me. I think
And he
if
just put you
we,
on the spot, Donna. He just
yeah,
put you on.
no, but no,
I
I think
represent all women. I didn't do that, but
No, I didn't say
yeah,
answer for all women. I said
as
she
for
can't,
me,
but I know
as
she a sister.
right,
She talked to other black women.
what I will say is that as for me, what I have come to learn is that my point of reference would be my father of how I deal with men, how I allow myself to be, when you're in a relationship or whether it be a romantic relationship or a friendship relationship, that first reference comes from the male figures in your family, but the most important one being your dad. And for me, like you said, I can't speak for all, my father, the short time I had my dad with me, my father had sickle cell anemia and it affected his kidneys. And he left me when I was a senior in high school. But the time that
That's a pivotal
we
moment.
were, and I would, and he wasn't even in the household, him and my mother, um, he had his own household and I would go back and forth, but they were, as co-parents, they were phenomenal. But the short time that he was here with me, he would sit there, and it's funny because he was he didn't believe in hitting. He would talk, and maybe because he was very stern too, and it always took for him to talk. Um, and I think he knew more how sick he was because he would try to put a now, as I reflect, he would try to put a whole lot into whatever the situation is. But losing him at a young age and not being able to go back like, well, Daddy, remember you said this and da 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 da. I had to just reflect on conversations and see where, as when I got older, on how to deal in relationships and things when I got older. But I just think that our point of reference for women is definitely the men in our household. And I remember, and not to jump, I remember I always felt like it takes a village because that's how I was raised because my dad wasn't there. So that means uncles or my father's friends jumped in to fill voids and things like that. And um, I just I don't. I think it's a long time. Like because you're growing up and you don't know like the way I will react at 50. Then and it should be. And then I was at 18. It was like, wow, I was really off base then. But it's something that it really has to be guided. And I think girls should be real. And when the opportunity is there, they should be really covered by their dad, by their father, or whomever the men are in their community if dad is not there until they begin to go off into relationships because it's so, oh my gosh, teenage years is just with hormones, with growing up, with shifting from adolescence to adulthood. It's a very, very confusing time. And I always say to myself that if I was offered, if God came down and said, Donna, you could go back to 18 years old or 16, I would be like, God, can I take my wisdom with me? Because just to think, you know, back then, those times were really, really confusing.
or an important decision
You
that you
know,
made was the wrong decision that you want to make different.
Right.
as you saying that, right? So I'm thinking about two things. One, you talked about a point of reference, right? The other thing you talked about is community. But we've already agreed that our community is dysfunctional, and you listen to John and you talk about how these boys who have been beat, see it as sexual abuse. We just fucked up, right? But I'm thinking about something I read. Tamika Mallory had posted where she was talking about that girl Carly. Did y'all were y'all aware of what happened this week? Where she had said that,
Recently,
yeah, where she said she saw a little baby on the road, and so she got out of the car and and left her wig, or says she was kidnapped. We don't know what the truth is at this particular point. But the point Tamika was making was she was saying that when you young in your life, and she was referring to her life, a lot of mistakes we make when we're young, right? She wasn't, she didn't say that this girl was lying or whatever, but we were talking about having people in your life who can pull you back, right? And I know that's true because and some of the things you're talking about now, Jonna, I know that John has been that friend for me over 30 years who have pulled me back, right, in my life. But you know with us being able to, with us being, as grown as we ever going to be at this particular point, and Donna, you used the word community. Do we really have the patience, y'all, to talk to some of these young people? I mean, really?
yeah. And I remember we had Mike on, I think, a couple of times this year, and I think in the beginning, he was, we were talking about mental health, and he was saying if you're going to ask somebody how they're doing, really
Be ready for
be
the answer.
willing to be ready for the answer. And I some of us have the patience. It's funny because when I find a young man and he's struggling, my go-to right now is I gotta find out when Mayor Baraka is having the next men's meeting because I think it would be helpful if you go there. So for
Mm.
young men, I think that what I trust is that Mayor Baraka has created a community where he's has something that's consistent
Community
and
violence intervention ecosystem. Come on. I'm gonna help you with
and when he and when these young men know that they need a place where if they go to that they're going to be somebody there. We have to be ready to receive them. And I think for me that I think Mayor Baraka has a heart that he looks at his first term, and I don't know if it was after he was elected or right before. Like he was already elected and he was waiting to be sworn in, I believe. And he was doing walks in the community and where there were challenges, maybe with gangs or drug trafficking and things like that. He was like, I'm coming here to let you know you guys are gonna have to find something else to do. If you need help, come down to City Hall. But hanging out here is not gonna be work. And when we come back again, it's not gonna be to talk. So I think that having everybody doesn't have patience, but when we find something that's tried and true, and I think that's our resource. But at what point does that resource become overwhelmed is also something we have to be concerned with, maybe.
one of them. I want to identify three resources right away that speaks exactly to the question. One, I mentioned earlier, the Newark Community Street Team. I want to also lift up the Newark Street Academy. Those are two original programs that put their hands on some of our young folks, young men and young women, right, at critical spaces in their lives, right. There's a program that works with young folks in town that actually predates us in this, and that's it actually started around the same time we started the protesting, but he developed it before we actually put Ras in office, and that is the hub, right? Al Tariq Best. We've had Al Tariq on, right? They have that's the oldest of the current voices that address those kinds of questions, right, in the community now that we're talking about. So I want folks to know that there are specific spaces that we have and that we need to be building out. We need to build on those spaces so that they're not just certain spaces in certain parts of the community, but we have them built all out throughout the entire city.
And I know that that was something that I believe that May Baraka's dad did because and I'm also wanting to say that I don't just send Newark people there. I send everybody there, wherever you're from. If I feel as though somebody's in a situation or they have a question, and I think, Mayor Baraka's program is helpful, I do refer them. And, they don't necessarily have to be a Newark resident. But I do also remember hearing my brother tell stories about Mayor Baraka's father doing similar things when he was a young man. So, that's not something, it was something that I believe he grew up around. And now I hear you talk about it too, um, Ed, that, you've been in with Amiri and he talking about how, about uh, government, how we should be governing Black communities. I think I've heard you talk about Amiri in terms of financial conversations that he has talked about. So, that's something that Mayor Baraka is improving on and continuing.
And yeah, just to add, one of the things that Amiri did that was hugely important is that Amiri understood how much can be done with the arts. That the arts can
Mm,
be political, the arts can be therapeutic, and the arts can be just fundamentally, creative. But it's a transforming space. It transforms space, and it's a transforming space for people who participate in the
right.
arts, particularly the performing arts, right?
Yes.
The Spirit House movers were dancers, and they were fundamentally male dancers. You know,
Ooh, is that current or old?
no, that's in the early days of the Black Arts movement. What
Okay.
well, that Amiri did, right? The Simba Wachungas, that was the space where young men were trained in the culture and in self defense and in those things and whatnot, right? So there were spaces that were movement centered, right? That did the kind of things that we're talking about. Uh,
And
but we're
and I
talking about
remember
a lot of stuff
something.
that's done in the public health context.
Yeah, but I think you just brought up something, Zaid. I believe the arts will reach the unreachable. If I have faith in anything, I think it's the arts because maybe there's the expectation is kind of different and it allows the person to be who they are and they are allowed to go through their emotions and I just believe, like I said, I just believe the arts will reach the unreachable.
Yeah, they can, and they
Zaid, I want
have.
to.
That's absolutely.
Mhm.
Come, I'm sorry. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Jonathan.
Zaid and Donna, I want to shift the focus of the conversation. We were supposed to have.
Let me do this before you do that. Let me just apologize to everybody. We
Mhm.
were supposed to have a guest to come on at 7, and for some reason that didn't happen. And he had a lot to say, so we're gonna figure out how to get Gregg Zeff back on because some folks may be tuning in looking for Greg, and we don't know what happened with why he isn't with us, but we're gonna try and figure out how to get him back. I'm sorry, John. Go
Okay.
ahead.
No, but this
You
is
want to
exactly
shift?
what I wanted to talk about. Like there's a situation that happened in Trenton, and there was also like there are two things that I know that you know a lot about, right? There were two issues that mean a lot to you. The case of the young man who was shot and paralyzed in Trenton. He represent Gregg Zeff
Was one of his lawyers.
is
Yeah,
one of his
Mhm.
lawyers, right? And he's also part of the NAACP.
yeah. State conference and NAACP. Yes.
Greg, we start speaking of Greg. Okay.
Yeah.
Right,
Right.
Mhm.
state conference of the NAACP. And
Mhm.
one of the things he was pushing for is to have the uh, the state police, right, the New Jersey State Police, go back under federal control, right?
Mhm.
Uh, what does that even mean? And a lot of people didn't even know that we were under federal control to
Oh,
begin.
that's what. So were they under federal control during the time where they were stopping people on the parkway? When was the what was this last situation that put them under federal control?
The incident on the parkway that took place in the 90s,
Mm.
Hmm.
where some
Tell us about
college
it.
students were harassed and shot at, right? They survived it, thankfully,
Like
right?
they shot the car they were in, right? A bunch of
Yes,
college kids,
yes,
and they shot up the car.
yes. It was a horrible. It was nothing but the mercy of the Creator that those kids survived that. But the state police is always. I mean, racial profiling started with the formation of the state police in New Jersey, right? So there's been this
Wait, wait,
long
wait, wait. Break that
time.
down.
Yeah, no, in the 1921, New Jersey State was created. State police was created, and one of the things that was organically built into how they were created was racial profiling. Right? Racial profiling is New Jersey is the mama of that, right? With all of its Garden State pretensions,
Wait,
right?
wait. So just to break that down, like, or just to repeat that, because I think that is like you're saying that when the New Jersey State Police were founded, like when they were founded,
One of the bricks it was built on was racial profiling.
wow.
1920. You saying 1921?
21. In fact, one of the reasons why I'm cussing out these dumb Democrats in the assembly and in the state house, Donna, is that 2021 should have been a centennial examination of that history in honor
Hmm.
of the George Floyd summer, an opportunity to look at something critically homegrown that was missed.
Right. Mm.
Yeah, so that's
And as a result,
back in
you.
'98. The original question, that led to them, going under a federal consent decree
Hmm.
when they were supposed to. Now I got noise in the background, y'all. I'm sorry, right?
Hmm.
They're them going under federal consent decree and implementing certain changes and whatnot, and I forget how long it lasted. I forget the year that it ended. I think it ended somewhere around 10ish, right? 9 or 10. Uh, and there had been some hiring of some black and brown and female officers and whatnot. There had been some moderation of things, but there are a lot, but that's gone, and there is a resurgence of the practice. There is a resurgence of hostility towards black candidates and female candidates coming into the field. There's a resurgence of all the stuff that you associate with that, right? Uh, and so they had a press conference last week.
Who's
Uh,
they?
the New Jersey State Conference of the NAACP, right? And they didn't have that many organizations with it. We dealt with Gregg is also supposed to be in our statewide apparatus called on Monday. We have a statewide coalition against police brutality called New Jersey Communities for Accountable Policing. That's part of our ACLU initiative, right? I'm trying to get Gregg on that because, for that to happen, you definitely need a united strategy, right? So there's this renewed problem, right? There is, and I can't remember the brother's post. I'm calling him brother loosely, but he's responsible for documenting the management of entities like the New Jersey Police. Oh, his name is where's Cookie Rivera when I need her? But there's been a recent study from within their own ranks of the backsliding, of clearly, racist and sexist practice within the New Jersey State Police that is triggering this call. So it's something we want to support, But here's the piece that's missing. I'll say this because I don't know how long we want to talk about that in Gregg's absence. That was not raised in their press conference, and that's at the heart of what the things that I'm involved in trying to do around this question of police accountability is that there was no apparatus created in the name of civilian oversight to monitor and check that behavior so that when a federal consent decree ends and the federal oversight by a judge and a monitor ends, they don't slip back into those practices.
Right. So
in addition, so to clarify, in addition to this fight that we have going on, that's around the fighting for the authority of the civilian oversight board here in Newark and other cities that want them, the way RAS constructed the Newark Civilian Complaint Review Board, we also need, I'm saying, a state entity, a community-based state entity of civilian oversight that oversees the New Jersey State Police, because that's the piece that was missing and allowed them to relapse into that kind of behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying there needs to be some level of accountability during the
Where there's police, there needs to be community control and civilian oversight. Absolutely, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, and that. I'm sorry, Donna.
No, I was gonna say, and looking at all of our different police, like municipal police, county police, I think looking at the state police, they are we know that police are paramilitary structures, but the state police probably looks like if their whole presentation when you see them, they look like military. They look like a very, very, very military. So it's interesting. And I would love to hear Gregg. Did Gregg where was he at on the perhaps revisiting in 21? Did you guys ever have a chance
No, I
to talk
mean, it
about
didn't
that?
happen. I'm saying that's something that should have happened.
No, I understand what you're saying, but I'm saying,
Yeah.
did you and Gregg ever have opportunity to talk about? Was he in agreement, basically?
Well, I mean, the sentiment came from one of the things that was supposed to happen that didn't was that the state police was also supposed to create a data for how they interact with the public, right?
Mm-hmm.
That documents, this person was stopped. What was this person's race? That was supposed to. There's a force encounter that's supposed to be a data to back that up. The victim was this, the perpetrator was this, the race was that, the gender was that, right? It was never built. The New Jersey Advance Media, formerly the Star Ledger, 2016, 2017, built something called the Force Report, where they did an intimately detailed evaluation of each police department's force reports and created something that was supposed to come out of the Attorney General's office as a part of the reform process that didn't, all right? And it's an important tool of evaluating behavior and monitoring behavior, right? But it didn't happen. And they're still, stumbling, trying to create something like that. They're still stumbling with that, right? And I'm being polite when I say stumbling.
Right, because they're just not doing it.
That to me, who me, throw a rock at their behinds, is like that stumbling is intentional.
Right.
until
Now,
somebody makes their ass do that.
do we know where any of the students, well, they're grown, but and do we know where any of the people that were in the van, the students that were in the van, do we know where any of them are today?
I have no idea. That's a wonderful question. I would love to know. I have no. I would hope they would all have gotten through school and have gotten on with their lives in a meaningful way, because they were
Mm-hmm.
college students. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they had a traumatic experience that shook them up for sure in a way that'll be with them for the rest of their lives. But they were indeed college students, and I hope they came out okay in terms of that how they are doing. That would be a great look back on. I appreciate that question for real.
Yeah, and their names were put in the paper when the
Oh yeah, it
story
was
came.
very
Okay,
public.
yeah,
It
so
was very public. Yes.
it might be easy to
Yeah,
find
it
them.
might merit a look up. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be interesting too. And you still have had, like you said, incidents that happen, because I remember what was the recent, they were following police, and maybe that came out of the force report, and I know Bloomfield was one of the towns that was highlighted, that when you drive through, that there were more police stops. I think that was Rutgers. I remember vaguely something similar going on within the last 15 to 20 years.
Well, you go into traffic court, right? Out, and it's not in Newark,
And
in the
I think that's what it was, out of traffic
or
court. Yeah. It
Patterson,
was,
right? You go into a traffic court in a community that is a majority white community. That court is going to be a majority black court, right? It's like a straight up, socially accepted cash cow, to put it mildly, for those municipalities who are very comfortable with that kind of racism. And then the thing that's dangerous about that is that people are not just getting tickets and paying tickets. Sometimes those traffic stops turn into fatal encounters or abusive encounters, right? And people get hurt and people get killed, right? So that it really it's at the cutting edge. It's one of the cutting edge spaces of dealing with racist policing.
Yeah,
Always.
the New Jersey state police had to pay $12.9 million to those four college kids.
That's right. That's
and
right.
in the story you're looking up now, Jonathan, are there names in that story?
Yep.
Yeah.
Danny Reyes, Keyshawn Moore, Jermaine Grant, and Rayshawn Brown. They
Yeah,
were the ones who were attacked by the police.
yeah, if you could send that article out to us, that would be
Sure.
helpful as we push Zaid to. And
Oh,
even
now to try to get the
or
Wow.
even or
As we
even
push Saeed.
even our friend,
federal judge said, "Did I ask the word?"
no, who's our she works with, I can't think, she's the journalist that we work with now often, with the Star Ledger.
Oh, Andy Richards.
Yes, Andy probably would love that.
Yeah, I hope
Yeah,
she's listening.
yeah.
She listens periodically. She does
Yeah.
listen.
We should get her to come on the show.
Yeah,
Andy has been on
Come on,
before
we
and
got to
get her
get her
come
back
on.
on. Just
Yeah,
first.
Okay.
and have her maybe when we reschedule Greg, have her on to talk about that. And she's coming from California, where they've had their own problems with the police
Yeah, I'm actually
in
trying
the
to
LA area.
my comrade Melinda Abdullah from Black Lives Matter Grassroots to come back on, because they just observed their 10th anniversary, and she's in the thick of that, and it's been through some crazy stuff with LA police just coming after her and her family. She's been a real standout on that front that I'm very proud of. And has her own show on 1580 AM.
Interesting, because
Oh,
I actually did not realize until maybe last year that there were actual gangs in the Los Angeles Police Department. I thought that was just like myth, right? I did not know that it has been documented. It is real. They have had hearings on it, like where people literally kill Black people as to get initiation in some of these LA cop gangs. I did not know cop gangs were real. I did not know that there were public hearings that were held on it. I did not know that there were elections that were based on it. I did not know there was this young independent journalist who basically risked her life and won awards for detailing cop gangs in Los Angeles. And we know it's wild because we never really talk about that publicly, right? You have to read about it in a think piece or in a special piece or in the long form of journalism, like because she did some real good research.
Unless you're from Los Angeles.
Right.
Los
right,
Angeles
right.
do talk about it.
Yeah.
Right, fair, but we don't talk about this in the rest of the country, right?
Mhm.
Like that there are actual gangs within police departments.
One of the
That
things,
do
and
initiate
here's where it manifested recently in the national conversation when
Mm.
a young man that got killed down in Memphis by those black cops, right? And with told to do so by the white officer on the scene too, by the way, right? Tyree Nichols, right? Most of these undercover squads have clear, bloody trails of abusive behavior because of all of the police entities. They're the ones that have the least oversight and the most leeway to get away with more because of the kind of quote task force. That's the language that they use. Right? Task force that they
Check
are.
out boys. Yeah.
Attitude, right? The squad that killed Amadou Diallo. They had a mantra: "We own the night." It's a national problem that's gotten attention in certain places, but it's very much a national problem. One of the things that's coming out of the Tyree Nichols case is a call to get rid of undercover policing because of its inherent abusive character, right? And so it's going to be interesting to see how far that goes, and that's something that merits looks in all of these communities where that problem exists. We got jump out boys. That's one of the places.
Jump out boy. Yeah.
And those were the people in Newark who are police officers who were known for.
Every community has a group of police jump out.
Yeah, I did have a former student at one point who was yoked up by the police. He had a lot of weed on him, right? He had a lot of weed on him. He didn't go to jail. He was held over, right? He didn't go to jail because they just took his weed.
And we could. Is John Training Day? Was that a John Singleton?
No, that was Antoine Fuqua.
Okay, Antoine Fuqua. But that could be. I mean, how things are loosely based on, but it was the order of the day, and the underlying story that, and it looked like an initiation, which Denzel, was trying to do to the other officers. So that's interesting, Games.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I wanted to, when we were talking about earlier about and Zaire talked about how much the arts help. I just wanted to ask one more question in terms of things that help. Jonathan, you've been a debate coach for many years. Do you find that oftentimes that you find that debating when students immerse themselves in there, that allows them to work through other parts of their lives that they may be have troubles?
Yes. When talking about debate, I don't think it's a substitute. Like in this context, it's not a substitute for police reform or any of that. Like that's just a different issue.
No, I said going back to when we were talking about the arts.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I said that.
Yeah, like in a completely different conversation. Like if we're talking about does debate help kids be able to deal with issues in their lives? Yes. It's leadership training. So it teaches kids how to deal with language so that they become leaders. And that's generally true of most debate programs that are good. Most debate programs that are good, what we teach is problem solving, how to, fight for change, what is the language you use? What's the logic of fighting for change? What is the logic when you're undermining fights for change? And how do you communicate effectively ideas in hostile spaces, right? Because I think the good thing about debate is that it teaches you how to deal with conflict when the other person is not your friend. They don't like you, right?
Using the words.
But you are exchanging in words in ways that will try to convince a third party. right? Like you're not really even trying to convince the other person; you're trying to convince a third
It's
party.
audience. That's
How do
right.
you do that? Because that isn't that you're inherently showing people how to deal with intense conflict. How do you deal with in conflict? How do you engage in conflict? How do you enjoy engaging in conflict? Right? Because that
Without actually, engaging in conflict.
right, without cursing people out, fighting people, right? How do you, what is the art of enjoying that level of conflict? We're gonna have one of our guests that's coming on at 8 is an artist Goke, who was also a former debater. He's been on the show before, and he's gonna we'll exchange some stories about his art because he's definitely he's an artist. He's gonna be talking about his art. He's gonna be talking about his music, but he's also gonna be talking about. But we can also ask him questions on how it relates to that. So, and he'll be happy. He'll be happy that Donna. He will be happy, joyous to answer that question.
And what you say, and I'm thinking, like we learned about Dr. King, how frustrated people would get with Dr. King talking about nonviolence, and they were just frustrated that people couldn't take him away from the nonviolence. They will get more upset because he stood for nonviolence, and the more people would antagonize him, he still stood on a nonviolent, and other people would be upset about Dr. King just saying, we're not going to go that way.
Well, I
And
mean,
let
I
me
think
tell you
he
something. Well, go
supported
ahead.
an
Go ahead,
effective
John. What's the point?
strategy. I was going to say he has supported an effective strategy for change, which was highly aggressive, right? And I think that many people don't recognize that King was highly, highly aggressive, more aggressive than
Nonviolence is nonviolent direct action.
right. Direct action like shuts down highways. It
Damn
shuts
right.
down cities. It is highly, highly aggressive. So when people are like, "Oh, he's not supporting violence," like, unless they're supporting a rebel movement that he's not down with, then I don't know what the complaint is other than complain, right? Like he had a strategy of highly aggressive action to try to bring issues to their head, to try to affect change, which I mean, I think it was effective, which is why he got killed. So there's that.
And add to that, the piece that I want, and I'm hoping that he gets reappraised for, because he also he was also trying to break a cycle of violence that was endemic to the American experience.
Right.
He wasn't just nonviolent tactically. He saw the harm of the violent character of the American experience and how that played out in racism. And that the question of engaging in violence, just because somebody's violent to you necessarily, may be something that will perpetuate a cycle, where we needed something that can confront the issue, pursue the justice, right? But at the same time, break a cycle of violence. Right, he was ahead of his time in that respect.
Way especially in terms of just the nature of exposing, like ultimately he was exposing the contradictions in the American public, which is why it was so effective, because he laid bare the brutality that was there, right? As in, this is America, right? You might as well, when the dogs and all the stuff, the iconic footage we see, you might as well say this is America, right? Because of the levels of violence that he exposed in the United States, in terms of the government, in terms of the people who think they're good people. He was like, you can't say you're good people and support this. You can't say you're good people and be that. You like these dogs? You good people? Okay. Right. And that was really the strategy, because he knew that, like Baldwin writes about, America was schizophrenic. It thinks that it is something that it is not, right? Which is why they recoil at the teaching of our history, because they recoil at an image that is not what a sanitized version of what they are used to. Right? So forcing them to see themselves in any way may have a violent reaction to some people, like the Florida governor, or when they had that thing about slavery, which is like, according to Kamala Harris, like slavery benefited some black people, right?
Well, isn't that recently one of the things that was recently in the news about
Understand
how
too.
how to teach, and that slaves came out with a skill. I don't know what
Right,
they were
some
saying. Yeah,
craziness, some
yeah.
Very
craziness.
white of them. Very white of them.
Right. Right. We are getting ready to head into our 8 o'clock hour. And in our 8 o'clock hour, we're going to have hopefully DJ Rhino join us as well and come on to talk about stuff. But we have an artist, Goke, who has released music. He's a Newark artist.
Love
He
that
is
hat. Yes.
both in and merchandise it, right?
Yes.
I need to get me that hat. I need to get me a hat.
Exactly.
Do I have to have a beard like that to have a hat like that?
I'll say he looking like I can't think of the drummer from
Oh, you're talking about Questlove.
yes, looking like Questlove up there. Yes.
All right. So just to introduce, Goke is a local artist. He is a producer of music, both hip hop and kind of R&B and a little bit of Afro beats, kind of like you break genres, right? And just a little bit of background of he is also a former debater, and I tell this story every time he comes on. He was the first debater to win a critical debate round rapping. About reparations. So this was at Berkeley. This was in quarters. He was one of the people who came in. We had people at Berkeley who came in first, second, and third. Goke came in third. He knew he wanted to take a chance, and it was in the round of 8. And he needed to win that round to help us really make history. And he read Ta-Nehisi Coates' Atlantic article on reparations. Read some other stuff about reparations, created a series of rhymes that can deliver the argument. And then he also created a series of rhymes like, if they say this, I'll rhyme this. If they say this, I'll rhyme this. If they say this, I'll rhyme this. And he ended up beating this kid from California. We were in Berkeley. We were in their
Beat
whole
that behind.
Yeah, from a very, very wealthy school in California. And he got beat so badly, he didn't know how he lost. As in, it was unanimous 3-0 decision against him. And the judges were like, no, you got beat. He made arguments. And he was like, what happened? How did I lose? Like, he was just rapping. He was like, he was making arguments. You didn't answer. He was responding. He literally responded to you. So
yes.
And okay, is that somewhere where people can still see it? Is that
no, that one was
that debate. Yeah, that was. I don't think that was recorded, right?
It was not. It was not.
Yeah, no. We had it was a very high stakes tournament. So there was a lot of like prepping and competitiveness going on, and there was also the fact that Austin doesn't tell this part, but the reason I was so confident rapping in the first place was because I knew my teammate had already taken second first. In my head, I was like, either one, I'm gonna rap and like do something amazing, or two, he's gonna have to work for this win. Like he's not just gonna get to walk over me. We had like a running joke about this one other debater on our team. We'd always go against each other in like semifinals or finals, and he'd always advance due to having better speaker points.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, your teacher has shared this story quite a number of times in this space.
It's a great story.
It's a tremendous story. It is where art and debate meets. It's a great intersection story.
Well, since it hasn't been recorded, somebody can find it. I think that's
that'd make a great film. We got that make a great.
That's what I was about to go there. We need to get a film with this and okay, give you 2 years.
I honestly think I still have the case. So, and I think we might have some recordings of me performing the case, because I think I did it once or twice at a debate camp, and I still have that case too.
True. You actually
still look back on it for inspiration every now and then.
Inspiration for your rhymes.
Yeah, because I was hungry back then, man. I was so hungry, like sometimes you got to dig deep to find that hunger again to really make music that can, impact people.
Well, tell me about you as an artist, okay?
Yeah.
Who are you? I know you have a project coming out soon.
Oh, yeah. So I have a project coming out actually in like 6 days. It's called Retrospect. This one is a little different from my last project. My last project was all Afro beats. But this current project is actually going to be more like R&B vibes. I like to call it like kind of like a 2000s vibe. going back to like that era with like, Omarion, Icebox, and like, just like the 2000s to before 2010, where like Drake era, I would say Drake and Lil Wayne era came into play, and R&B music was like much more soulful. So yeah, I have that project coming out July 27th. And I also am currently enrolled. Is there a place that I could post a link? I'm actually currently enrolled in another competition.
Yeah, if you put it in our
I'll
chat,
look it up.
if you
I'll
put it
look
in the
it up.
chat, then we'll put it
let
on.
me see if I can find that. But I'm also in a competition right now to get a chance to win an ability to perform to like a live audience for Odyssey in August. So I'll post a link whenever I get the chance to. But if people could just go and vote for me, you get like one free vote daily. It would mean a lot to me if you could just shoot a vote out there. That would be really dope. Give me a chance to.
We have a private chat. So if you put your link in the private chat, I'll put it online for you.
Okay, yeah, I'm just trying to find a link right now.
Yep.
So definitely share it out.
So the project, where can we find it? Can we find it like? What do we find it on? Is it streaming? Do we just go?
Yeah, so it's actually going to be available on all platforms. It's going to be available on Apple Music. It's going to be available on Spotify. It's going to be available on Amazon Music. It will also be available on like YouTube and like really any other streaming platform you could find. I can also send a link for that as well. So the music is just very easily accessible. If you just search Goke right here and then retrospect, you should easily be able to find it. But it isn't posted yet. It's posted in 6 days. So if you search right now, you won't be able to find it. But I can post a hyperlink for that as well inside of that private chat for you.
Okay. All right, right on. Okay.
All right. Now do you have does it recognize your past songs? Because I know that you've done things before. If I look up Goke, would I get
there's a YouTube piece out on you?
Yeah, so if you look up Goke right now, it's like super hard to find because there's like a lot of Gokes. So if you want to find my music right now, you'd have to type Goke, but you'd also have to type Hamper of the Heart. That's my last EP that I released that like got over 10,000 streams. So like that one is like really easy to find, but the name is kind of long. It's Hamper of the Heart. But if you search that, you can easily find me as well. But for this next piece, it's just retrospect, so it will be a lot more easier to just type in Goke retrospect and then be able to gain access to that.
All right. So do you hey, DJ Rhino, welcome.
You're the DJ.
You're still muted.
Yeah, no, I was trying to find my way back. Yeah, I was trying to research, brother. What's going on?
Okay.
Peace.
Yeah. So question, Goke, what made you get into?
Yeah, you beat me to the question. Yeah, I was going there.
What made you actually get into like to hip hop, R&B, world music? Like you do kind of it all. So why the switch to arts? You're a math major by training.
Yeah, so it's actually kind of interesting. My whole life, I wanted to do music. So I'd say it probably started in like church choir. Hello, can you hear me?
We hear you fine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So it started off in like church choir. I started playing the piano for my church. I think by the time I was like 9 years old, my older brother was playing the drums. And then my mom, she was a singer in the choir. So from there, like I kind of always like, during her practices and stuff, I would like go on the piano and like make a beat, and I'll tell my brother like, yo, drum something to this, or like, do this, that, and the third. And it started off as just like those little freestyle sessions. Then eventually I started writing lyrics to those beats. I had like a little rap notebook. And it just grew from there, to be honest. I've been writing songs since I was 11. And a lot of me, initially, a lot of my first songs that I put out were actually songs that I wrote like over a decade ago, where I was just trying to push out all of the music because I had written so much. And I always knew in my mind, I was like, I wanna get to the point where I start releasing music, which is why I was always writing it. But I never knew when. And then I think it was just 2 years ago when I was like, I guess I should start now, I'm not gonna live forever. So I started pushing out the songs that I had already written, and then there was just more music still coming to me from like my life experiences, and then I started adding that as well. So eventually, I just had so much music, and I was just like, I gotta start putting all of this out, especially because my engineer too would be so mad at me. He'd say, "Bro, you can't just like record stuff and just leave it and sit on the shelf." So I'd say, okay, and that's when I started taking this more seriously, creating like projects, EPs, getting into like the whole idea of just actually becoming a musician. And I guess part of me feels bad for putting it off because I didn't know how much work this would be. It honestly feels like I have 2 jobs right now, and it's so crazy. But it's like extremely fun. It's also just like therapeutic for me to, talk on an instrumental and have people listen to it and relate to it or like tell me about how it makes them feel. And that's just been really good in terms of just like pushing out my thoughts and feelings out there, and also like hearing back from people.
Okay.
Is there, can we get a sample of your
Uh,
work? And
yeah,
if it's
you mean
no,
like,
oh, go ahead.
is there a way I could like play a song right now?
I
If
was
you
think,
send it the link, send me the link to it. Do you have a link to the song, or you
Yeah,
can, or can you
I can
share
send
on
you
your
the
end?
YouTube link. I
You
can
might be
send
able
you
to
the
share it
YouTube.
on your end. I'm sorry.
I could send you. I could send you a YouTube link if you could play
Okay,
that.
yeah. Send me the YouTube link to All Politics Are Local, and we'll put it up.
Okay. Let me send you that right now. When you say
And
sample, I have like a large catalog, so if you could give me something more, like what do you want to hear? Like rap, Afrobeat. Uh, I
what
have
I
I
a
was
want
lot
to
of
hear some
music.
of
thinking,
your hip hop.
what I was thinking freestyle, because you just said you love talking over. So I was thinking
Oh,
something freestyle. Yeah.
That's true too.
yeah, I could freestyle for y'all right now if that's what you mean.
I
I
think
could
that's
do
what she's
that.
looking for. I think that's what she's looking for.
Okay.
She's looking for a freestyle right on the spot.
Okay. I like that. All right. Let's see. What do I want to share?
Well, I can't wait
To
to
be
get
on the
this.
spot there, but okay. So I actually do have a poem that I only read this in like one other place. I wrote this poem like 2 years ago. I wanted to do like a whole video for Black History Month to go along with this, so it doesn't really have an instrumental to it. But the poem is called Black, and it goes like this. So B is for better than your average, bigger than most spaces, bold enough to hold my own against a barrage. Black as the mind sleep, blessed by the stroke of an omnipotent composer creating darkness so beautifully, leading nations, leading people. Long live the legends, many niggas lived and died fighting evil. Lies to the people, I'm tired. Last time was the last time, like last time we said we tried peaceful. Apathetic, regrettably, asking all the right questions, afterwards breaking into sections, but not apologetic. A historical evidence would suggest, but let's be honest, we might never get. But can a nigga get a check? Could we really talk about reparations a sec? Cocky as fuck, know my value. Copy my swag, commit the act, and have the nerve to call me cattle. Knowing I'm a king, knighted by God, sent to battle. Killing anti-blackness, that's my rival. I am black.
All right.
So yeah.
Yeah, that
Okay.
was
You heard it here on All Politics Are Local.
that was
And I'm gonna share something that you did when you were in high school.
Okay.
I'm gonna share something.
Wait, is it the Tommy Curry thing?
I'm gonna share something you did when you were in
I'm
high school.
about to put you on the spot. Oh, we're about to put you on the spot. Here we go.
It's the Tommy Curry.
Can you hear it?
Dr. Tommy Curry,
Yeah.
Dr. Tommy Curry, Dr. Tommy Curry, happy birthday, Dr. Curry. Dr. Tommy Curry, Dr. Tommy Curry, Dr. Tommy Curry, happy birthday.
He was born in October. At age 1, he walking. By age 2, he writing. By age 3, he talking. Had a crawfish named Sammy. He was a friend, not a pet, but this don't make him soft, cause he's as hard as writers get. At age 12, he reading critical legal theory. I mean, he rarely had to read no Google, no Siri. Then he had to read critical race. Others couldn't keep up the pace. He was an and empiricist, making up things weren't his taste. Then he went to college just to get some knowledge. PhD in 1 year, and then he got acknowledged. Dr. Curry, Dr. Writing is fighting. Dr. Tommy Gun lighting up the page when he gets excited. Ice when he writes. You think he had a cold printer, but the reason he's so cold, cause he always read in winters. Always read in winters. Always read in winters. Always read in winters.
I'll stop it there. But this was fun. This was
The way he spun out that chair.
Yes.
How long ago was that?
That was in 2015, 2014.
Now, where was that at, John? That's part of your collection, Jonathan, or is that on All Politics?
Well,
Local?
that's Atagoke and the kids back then. They did a video tribute to Dr. Tommy Curry for his birthday. Dr. Tommy Curry is helping us out with a lot of work with debate. He debated like Atagoke and really helped him and the rest of our team do well, right?
There's just some PTSD from those debate rounds.
Yes. Because Dr. Curry, right, like debated him in a one-on-one debate, right, to show him just, so we took like 2 hours to diagnose what happened in the debate, but ultimately we all got better as a result of that.
He did not hold any punches back. I'm telling
you. He did not. He treated him like a grown man. This
was like near the peak of when I thought like I'm really like I was a nationally competitive debater, and he's out of the activity for 15 years. I'm thinking, I could he's gonna put some respect on my name, but that's not what happened. I ended up putting all the respect on his name.
That was hilarious. But yeah, so I thought you would appreciate seeing that video because I always knew that. Then I was like, yo, he's got some flow. You and Sunhee were even Amit was great. But with the two of you were like, oh, they could actually be rappers, right? Like in terms of their flow, it's really good. But yeah, so question. Right now, you're releasing your stuff on the streaming platforms. And this is also a really good conversation with you and DJ Rhino, right? Is there a fundamental shift in the way that the culture of hip hop is going forward now than before? As in, before there were clubs, there were physical spaces. People were in those physical spaces, right? There were communities, there were neighborhoods. It was like hip hop was a part of a neighborhood growth. Is that the same now, or is it really just independent artists using, equipment that's a lot cheaper, right, or a lot more access? If you got a Mac, you could be, you can mix. If you got a Mac, then if you got a Mac, you can be a producer, right? Does that fundamentally change everything in that way? Like being SoundCloud versus how it was before?
I mean, as far as technology?
As far as both technology and community, right? Like before, when hip hop was like your neighborhood. It was connected. Your geography, right, was important in hip hop. That's why sounds were regional, right? Like there was a New York sound because all y'all knew each other, and you were all in the same clubs. You were all doing the same, or at least you were influencing each other in that, right? Is that similar now, or is it just like you have your producer friends, right, and you're releasing to the world larger, or is it still geographic? Like, are your collaborators, people who you are influenced by, are they local rappers? Are they local artists? Like, how does that work in terms of the artist, the hip hop, R&B world, like the bohemian that you are, right? Because you're like fall into a lot of these categories. Is that a product of geography?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak so much to the past geography, because I'm only 26 years old. Well, about to be 26, so I haven't been on this earth that long. But so I don't know how the geography has changed, but definitely the technology has completely like it has completely changed the game. Even like right now, right? There's a development of like AI, right? The use of people literally AI can like mimic people's voices, whether it's like a Drake sound or like even Patrick Starr. I've been seeing memes of like Patrick Starr singing like I don't know, like Mary J. Blige songs on TikTok in his voice, and it's like he's hitting all the notes right, and it's just like creating a new interpretation of like a sound that already existed. So technology is definitely like affecting the game in terms of like a lot of people can be consuming like more or less the content in terms of like the context or like the meaning of the songs or even literally just the same lyrics but just in a different format, right? Some people might like one song might have like at least like 5 different versions, right? Like a sped up version, a slowed down version with like reverb, like another version with like someone else's voice singing the same lyrics, et cetera, et cetera. So technology has definitely made it very interesting how we're now able to interact with content, especially in terms of just like 5 people can hear the same song or all know the lyrics to the same song, but they all heard different versions of the song, and they're all kind of like vibing to it in a different way. So it's like it's good in some senses, but it's also kind of like bad or not bad, but it has drawbacks in terms of just like we're not necessarily the community can't be as tight since we aren't all necessarily listening to the same thing anymore. But we do still have those shared views and concepts, or clearly we still do since those sounds are still the ones that are being pushed forward.
Are you in the same? Are you in clubs? Like, do you perform? Are there
Yeah.
local community followers? Like, when
Yeah,
you
but
perform,
even just for performances, right? Like you have to take the setting into account. Like I was saying, right? Like any completely or quote unquote like complete version of like a song, right? Or a completed song will have at least like 5 different versions, right? You have like your radio version, then you have like your version that is like maybe an explicit version. Then you have a version for like your live performances where it might just be like ad libs and the beat. But then depending on where you're going or how someone is trying to like mix your song into the platform, once again those things could like change, right? So you could like be at a live performance, or you could be at you could be at a live performance and it might be net beneficial in like a more dancing setting to play like a sped up version of your song versus than like the normal speed of it, or vice versa, right? A slowed down reverb version for people to just like vibe to. So the setting kind of definitely plays a large role into how you want to like push out that sound.
and you, if jump in, Rhino,
But
if
I
you want.
want like go. So your work, will you be? Are you performing anywhere over the summer? Are you doing any live performances?
Yeah, so right now I mainly just do like pop-up shows, so like talent shows, like or like music. There are like certain groups that I am in with like a bunch of other musicians where we just like
Mm.
schedule shows together. And like if we have a venue, we just schedule like a performance and have people like pay at the door, or even have performers pay as well to perform. So I don't have any like consistent form of
Mhm.
performances right now.
And
Uh,
when you say pop up, that means that there's not a set club. It's just wherever the party happens to be at that point.
Exactly. Yeah. It's very much so like more like a pop up situation. Like sometimes it might even just be like a bar. Like some bars just randomly will have like a talent show sometimes. And if you have the right networking and resources to be able to like attend that show, then that's an opportunity for you. But knowledge is definitely power in terms of just like booking those venues and knowing when they pop up and knowing where they are. I definitely don't have any of that figured out, which is why I said I pop up. Like, it's literally when I see it that I could do it.
Okay. Now, you also mentioned something, and this is actually what I want to get uh, both of you talking about as well. Um, there's the writer strike and there's the actor strike, but it's going to impact music probably even more pronounced as it's impacting it now. And that's, you mentioned it earlier, artificial intelligence, right? I always like to think of they've been trying to get blackness without black people for a long time, and they got white singers singing black music. They'll and now they don't even need to consult you. They could just get a voice, create it. And what do you think about AI being used in that way? Because it seems like if I can go to the past, or if I'm a record company and I own the catalog, right? Why can't I just use Mary J. Blige's voice now without her permission? Like, I own the catalog, I own the voice. I can create a whole new hits with Mary J. Blige's voice, not pay her a dime because she ain't singing. Like, what do you think about AI and what they're talking about in terms of actors and how that plays out in music? And because like the song that was released, that was a Drake song without Drake, there was the virtual rapper. Like, what does this mean?
Oh my God.
I feel there's definitely got to be some legalities, placed in all of this. You know what I mean? As far as using, the likeness of somebody's voice or something like that. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, on the other side, I'm sure there's going to be a market. There's going to be a market for that, where there's people who really don't care. They would just like to be entertained by that kind of stuff. Like I heard what the brother was saying, and I think I heard that too. It was Patrick Starr singing Music Soul Child's Love.
Yeah.
And then just the other day, I heard Frank Sinatra doing the lyrics to Coolio's Gangsta's Paradise. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like, I'm sure there's going to be people that's going to be entertained by that. But real music lovers and stuff, they're not going to fall. They're not falling for it now. Like, there's a lot of people that are against this whole AI thing, and they see what's coming, what they're trying to do. You know what I mean? But I think I feel there has to be legalities, brought into this. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't just use the likeness of somebody's voice just like that. You know what I mean? You got to deal with that person or that person's estate or something. Something's got to be placed in there to make this not so easy. This can't just go along and we just let it get, let them get away with it. Something's got to happen. You know what I mean? Something's got to be done about it.
Yeah, and especially since AI is almost inherently based on other people's stuff, right? Because how does it be able to produce the new music? By having an infinite catalog of other people's music historically going back. And if I go to school for music, or if I'm like listening to other people's albums and I copy certain things in the style, I bring something new to it, right? Like, all these, the reason why the music changes and evolves is because the artist, they see what happened before, they've used and play what happens before, but they have their own spin on it that pushes the music further. They do something new, different. It hasn't been done before, right? It seems like with AI, it's not about studying music. It's not about artistry. It's about biting. It's about just straight plagiarism, not giving anybody credit, because I'm going to take all the stuff in the past and just put and make it so it sounds like something they've heard or familiar with and like, which is very different than actual artistry, right?
And there's no human connection to it. There's no human involvement. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Other than those that are controlling the computers and the program. But like, there's no human involvement in that. And I think, like I said, I'm sure there's a percentage of people out there. There's a market out there that enjoy. Like, think about the whole hologram thing. You know what I'm saying? When they were doing that at Coachella, you had holograms of what was it, Michael Jackson or Tupac, and I mean, some people were entertained by that, but the majority of human life, they're not feeling that. We don't want to see a hologram of Whitney Houston and Biggie. We don't want to see that. You know what I mean? I'd rather just listen to their music, love them for who they were, man, and bless their spirit, man, in that way, man. Like seriously, man. Like, when there's no human involvement in something, we're gonna lack the connection. There's not gonna be any human connection to it. You know what I'm saying? People are not feeling it. So I mean, like I said, for those that are entertained by it, it is.
I mean, yeah, because
I will say, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go. Nope. You go.
Okay, I will say like this was like a long time coming, right? It's not like this AI stuff happened overnight. I feel like there were very slow advances in music that artists definitely, like big artists definitely did try to challenge at one point, but just eventually got overtaken, right? Even if you just look at like the pushback against like auto tune when it was originally coming out, or like the pushback against like people being outed to have ghostwriters, like there definitely is like a push for a certain form of authenticity to music. But the issue has just always been like people who are kind of like craving sound. And I say that because I do think like music and sound are like two different things. Like there's literally just like pages on like Instagram or TikTok that like literally just play sounds. And it's not even necessarily music, it might just be like someone like flipping through the pages of like 500 books, and that sounds relaxing to people. Or even just like people listen to like rain sounds for like sleep, or like white noise in the background to like block out noises. And I feel like people are there, or not people, but there's becoming a conflation between like sound and music. I think sound is like good, it could be like therapeutic, it could be nice, but for the most part, sound doesn't really like necessarily have to have any meaning behind it, and it doesn't necessarily have to make you think about anything, right? It's just something that you enjoy.
It doesn't have to have words, right?
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't even have to have words, it just has to be something that's pleasant to hear. And I feel like there's like a huge push for like sound to overtake music, and that's probably where the problem is coming in. And there's, it started with like auto tune, where people are like not even using their voices anymore. They're trying to like, just sound better. And now we're here, right, where we have like AI versions of like Patrick Star singing our favorite our favorite songs. So it's like it definitely didn't happen overnight, but it was just like those little baby steps, I think, that happened like one after another, that eventually just led to people having a higher value for sound over music. But like DJ Rhino was saying, there still are people who are music lovers. There are people who could tell, they could sift through that BS and be like, yeah, that's a good sound, but that's not music. You know what I mean? Like, but
I
not
hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying about the difference between sound and music, but I think with AI, there's one particular thing that's most disturbing, and that's ownership, right? Like a corporation can own your likeness, your image, your intellectual content. They could presume to own the intellectual contents of everyone who came before, right? Like, and because that's saying that I never have to use a human being again. And that's what they're fighting for in the actor strike, right? Like, they're like, if you can make virtual actors, if you could program in like scripts, because most scripts are formulaic, right? If you could program that in, if you could program in actors, then all you need is to just, if you own those past movies, they're like, okay, well, we own your likeness and your image.
They already did it with Morgan Freeman. Have you seen that thing with Morgan Freeman?
No,
that creeped me out. I saw something online. It was like a commercial or something, and it was supposed to be Morgan Freeman's voice. You could tell it wasn't. You could tell it wasn't his voice, but it was supposed to sound like Morgan Freeman. Right. You know what I mean? And I'm like, wow, this is going on. Like, it's already happening.
It's the one you were talking about where he was like, I am not Morgan Freeman, like halfway through the video, right? But like, you don't even know. Yeah, I saw that one. Like, they had his whole likeness, his voice, everything. Yeah. And it was like literally the person like showed them stepping out of like whatever AI algorithm was making them look and sound that way, and then back to their normal voice, and then back to Morgan Freeman's voice. And that was mind-blowing.
And I think if it's monetary and you're getting and corporations are making money off that, I think the 13th Amendment might click in on that. Because like, how are you you are literally owning someone's voice and likeness to do what you want them to do. Could you make them do porn? Right? Like that, what's the limit of what you could do with somebody else's image and likeness
I said that when this thing first started popping off, I said one day we're gonna hear Malcolm X doing a Lil Wayne verse.
Yes.
And I don't think, and not even a little that wouldn't be extreme, but Malcolm X doing something.
Crazy.
But I
Malcolm X working on the White House or something like that.
or him saying something something to the extreme that Malcolm X saying that support Trump, or can you imagine using his voice to endorse something Trump, that Trump is doing something like that. I think that's an egregious, and that's when, ooh,
That's the thing too. This thing could reach
yes.
levels like of media, like what we see on the screen as far as media and things like that, and what we think we're hearing and seeing in news and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
And it's already
it's
that,
dangerous.
the big cases they have that, that was it during the Clinton uh Trump election where AI was in and they had all of these bots or whatever you want to call them putting things up and people were believing everything that
Oh
was being
yeah.
posted on social media. Well, go okay, I'm over on your Instagram page. So this retrospect would be what we would say back in the 70s. Is that your album cover for retrospect?
Yeah, that's my album cover.
That is beautiful. And then tell me the one with the black cover and it just has words. It kind of looked like um a New York Times-ish type of thing where it says September 12th, 2022. The secret is that there is no secret. The shortcut is actually the long way. And it's just real
Oh,
simple. Yeah. On yeah, those are you got some nice
thank you. Yeah,
you're making us
I put
want
little
us to
clips
think. Yeah.
yeah.
Want to
And
keep
then I
us
also
thinking.
I wanted that picture to look kind of like a walk down memory lane because that's kind of
Yeah,
like what retrospect was about. So the album
right.
before, Emperor of the Heart, was all about love, was all about showing emotion. Retrospect is kind of like the opposite, or like kind of like when that high from the love comes down and you're like looking
Jonathan,
back.
if you can snatch it and put it up, it's the one I have with the Instagram, and if you can put that one up, yeah, that's a nice picture. It's in the private chat, Jonathan. It says Instagram. So I'm sorry, Goki. It's like you wanted people to think, and I like the alley, like after a rainy day. It
I
seems
got it in.
like,
Yeah. And then
and that's
one of my favorite tracks on it too is actually a remix to I don't know if y'all remember that the T Pain and Bow Wow song "Out of My System." That's pretty. I don't know if that's if anyone remembers that, but that's
so
one of
you
my.
have five tracks on there. One is Gleam, two is Ground, three is I Tried, four is Due to Me, and five is Sab song instead of Sad song. Play
Yeah.
on word. Okay. So it's why so which you and the play on words. So why Sab song instead of Sad song?
I don't want to ruin the surprise, but I will say it's
Okay.
very obvious once you hear the song.
Okay. Gotcha. And
But
can you
yeah,
come up?
SAB is an acronym for something.
Okay. If you move the page up, Jonathan.
Oh, Ken.
You
I don't know.
can't.
I don't know if you can on that
You got to
screen.
scroll up. Yeah.
Yeah, scroll. Yeah. Yeah, a
I
lot.
put the link. I put the link on our Facebook page. In the chat on the Facebook page.
And actually, there's two. Then I see the retrospect, and it looked like between a house on fire or something.
Oh yeah, so that one that was a promotional piece that I posted afterward. So
Hmm.
I had a very strong verse in the studio one day that just kind of and it's actually like an unfinished song to be honest. Like, but that one verse is just like a really standout verse that happened, and I was kind of unable to finish the song after that because I was like, this verse is so hard. I gotta come with that same energy throughout the rest of the song. But that was one of the honorable mentions. I was trying to finish that for retrospect, but I actually never got it. So that's probably going to be released on the next project for sure.
Yeah, I don't know if you or your photographer, you have some like even the one was standing on the balcony at the hotel. First thing comes to my mind with that was like Dr. King, and I don't know
Mm.
like if
Yeah.
you do you get like do you your photography.
Yeah, so
Is it your goal that you want it to be thought provoking?
yeah, very usually I try to put a lot of thought into everything.
Hmm.
Very recently, just a video. I was a lyricist first and foremost, so lyricism has always been my go-to. Once I started making music, I realized there has to be like visual aspects that go along with the lyrics, especially for like places like Instagram and TikTok. So that's when I started like trying to find like the best places to put that. Like if you see like there's one with me on the beach,
Hmm.
that's just like and that's kind of like a chill vibe kind of song. The one with me on the balcony that you just saw with me like looking so aggressive. That was a remix to a popular instrumental that was going around at the time. And then yeah, I try to match the energy to like the video. So if you see me like sitting down, cooling, it's gonna be kind of like a relaxed vibe. Versus if I'm like standing up, and like being active, that I'm probably talking about something that's energizing. And then yeah, I also have little posts there as well where I explain all of the songs. So every single 5 track that I have coming out for retrospect, I have like a little explanation on my page where I talk about the inspiration for the song, what was going through my mind when I was making it, and what happened at the studio. What basically I like to go into like my process, the creation process of like each one of those songs, and
And
then
do you realize they used to do that on albums? Like you got an album, it's all an album could sometimes almost be like a miniature book. You open it up and it has stories and everything. Um, you see DJ Rhino's collection of albums, like the albums used to be.
God, I miss my.
Uh, yeah, you could open it up and like just what you exactly said. I want to thank the inspiration, every that inspired the song goes in there. They would tell, who was critical to that song. Albums were books basically.
yeah,
Yeah, it was a
On
whole
the liner
experience
note.
when you had an album.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah, I'm
Liner
trying to
note.
get to that level.
Yeah,
uh,
so keep that up. That's good.
Is this your first full project, your full album?
these two are technically EPs in my opinion. They are
Okay.
albums. I think Emperor of the Heart was 6 songs, and Retrospect was just 5. So
So this is your
once I
second.
put out like 8 songs, I'll say that'll be like my first album.
Okay. So this is your
Yeah,
second project, though.
yeah. Second project,
Okay.
and I plan on pulling out an album at the end of this year, like a full album. Uh, yeah. So, but
And go get where's your family from?
oh yeah, my family is Nigerian, so both of
Nigeria.
my parents are from a small village in
I
Nigeria
did go.
called T. Yeah, I did go. Yeah, that's my full name.
Mm-hmm.
And then like yeah, you can hear my accent come out in like some of my songs too when I start talking in Yoruba. So that's interesting too. I have 2 accents. My accent usually only comes out when I'm talking to my parents because they swear they can't understand my English accent. Like I'll have
what's
to. What are you saying?
what's the rapper from Nigeria and his mother starts with a B.
Burner Boy?
Burner Boy, when his mother got up and accepted his award one year, and she encouraged, you know, us, go to the continent and learn and everything like that. But the African Nigerian music is um is a lot of people like coming from people just Nigerian music scene is just really blowing up.
Yeah,
It's,
and
Music itself.
that's another interesting note too. So I actually one of my biggest influences for music as well was one of
Mhm.
like a very close family friend of mine. I call him my uncle because he's basically like uncle to me. But yeah, he came here in like the 2010s. His name was Yasi, and he was trying to like inject Afrobeat into like hip hop. He was
Mm-hmm.
actually like the very first person to me that I actually saw try to do that. And this was like when I was like 9, 10 years old. I would be so happy to like run to my school with his CDs, like, yo, look at this. Like, my uncle just dropped and like He was making music videos on YouTube and everything. And it's just so well, it's like bittersweet to me now that I'm seeing Afro beats blow up so hard
Mm.
because back then it was just like such a barrier for him for like people to like, just to even like vibe with the sound. I feel like, dancing wasn't as I guess important or like stylistic back then. People just like hard rap and stuff, and he was trying to like inject that back then. So now that I see it blowing up, I'm like, this is the perfect moment in terms of just like for me because I have that inspiration from way back then, and I also have like more of an American culture than him. He was born in Nigeria and then
Yeah.
like, moved here, whereas I was born here and kind of like always grew up in African churches, kind of grew up in like an African community, etc. So I was never too far away from my culture. But
Yeah, and I don't know, and maybe Ryan, you know, but I don't know if people, when Biggie was alive, that we knew of his Jamaican roots. But when on one of the documentaries, what when you hear that as a kid, with his uncle was a DJ, and how that influenced his music, and so I don't know if that was something that was said, he talked about when he was alive, but I was like, oh, because his music, was just, all that becomes a
Club is an
part of,
important root of hip hop.
and jazz too with Biggie. What would you say, Zaid? I'm sorry.
Club is an important root of hip hop.
Yeah, the Jamaican side, the West Indian side of things, man, was definitely
It's an important root
big
of hip
part,
hop.
big part of hip hop. You know what I mean? I mean, we talking about black people, right? We talking about black people. We talking about our people, right? And so we come from all over the place. And so yeah, I mean,
That big boat ride.
think of how
Yeah.
many Jamaicans and West Indians and Haitians that we grew up with in the in our neighborhoods when we were coming up. That all became Puerto Ricans. You know what I'm saying? That all became a part of hip hop. You know what I'm saying when it started. So yeah, there's a we talk about Busta Rhymes, Biggie. I mean, there's a whole. I mean, Fife Dog, rest in peace. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a whole lot of brothers and sisters, man, that come from the islands, man. That
And the Nigerian forerunner of this conversation, of course, is Fela, right?
Fela
Fela
Kuti,
Afro,
yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's this brother, yeah. Fela and Mano Dubango. See how now I'm the
Yeah.
impact of funk globally plays out with those brothers, right?
Mhm.
And they both of them were powerful.
and then
Did y'all hear about?
you
Did
got
y'all hear
Disco
about?
King Mario, you got Disco King Mario, you got Cool Herc. You know what I mean?
Cool Herc was boom. Wow,
Well,
he was just
uh,
the
well,
synthesis, boom, everything that would you call boom. Herc just brought it, bam, and that's
and
the
who was
that's
that?
That
that's the New
sound
York
system.
seed,
He brought that
absolutely.
sound system, which was another
Yeah.
part of Jamaican
That's the
culture.
New York seed, absolutely, and
And Goki, what were
that
you
was
and Goki,
diaspora.
and Goki, what were you
I
saying?
was
Did we
gonna,
hear what?
I was gonna say, did y'all hear about that lawsuit that's going on with like reggae with Dia Lupa?
Nah.
No, what's going on?
Oh yeah, so apparently, most of like the reggae like dancehall songs are all derived from this one artist named like Dia Lupa, and he's like basically filing a lawsuit I think against like over 100 over 100 like major reggae artists just saying they kind of like stole his sound. And if you, I didn't do that much research on it, but at least like four or five. Well, if you listen to dancehall music, you would notice that like the tempo and the beats of like all those songs are like kind of like the same. And I just
Yeah,
thought like maybe that was a cultural thing, but apparently they've just all like been biting off of like this one guy
that's
and
crazy.
like not crediting him. So that's
But
like
it's
a whole.
so
I gotta research that. That's crazy.
Yeah. But even like Rhino, you were saying when you were talking about the holograms and things like that, like the lawsuits that were coming out, I think against, how many people were improperly sampling Marvin Gaye, I believe. And and you have to ask yourself, is it intentionally improper or is it just love, when you love music and everything, and then you become and you grow up, it, as you evolve, it becomes a part of you. And I understand that people have, that's what the legal part is, like you have to learn how to do things proper, but I think is that we begin to love things and we want to manifest what we love through our art. and everything.
I mean, it's
So
two things. I mean, it's the fact that we love music, right? But then also it was a big part of our culture in hip hop, where we were taking the music that was out, we were taking the records that were out already and playing them, and then repeating those breakdown parts. You know what I'm saying? So we were already from the jump, we were already taking from somebody else.
It was
You know
inherent.
what I'm saying? It's,
Yeah.
it's like Grandmaster Cass. His famous quote is, "Hip hop didn't invent anything, but it reinvented everything."
Yes,
You
that's
know what I'm saying?
powerful.
so
That's what it is. So I mean, we were always taking, and when we couldn't use the break beats, when we started making actual records, we couldn't use the actual records that we were getting the break beats from. So we had bands that would replay those records, that would replay those breakdowns, and there was still, we had legal issues with that, because but what they did back in the Sugar Hill days and the Enjoy Records days, what they did, the bands would play something, but they would change it up a little bit so that they didn't have to pay for the rights to the
Yeah.
to the music, because they would change up certain notes and stuff like that, kind of make it their own. You know what I'm saying? But it was originally derived from these break beats. You know what I'm saying? And then once sampling came in, they got rid of the bands playing the music, and they just started sampling those break beats from that we were using in the beginning. In the first place, we started sampling, and then comes the sampling rights, because once we went crazy and we're sampling like 10 different records on one beat, and
Yo, you gotta ask somebody.
yeah, then it got crazy. You know what I mean? We ripped James Brown to shreds.
Oh my god.
You know what I mean? So it got crazy, and what happened was we just needed some control. People still sample, and we still do it, but now it's controlled, where it's like, you know what I mean, where everybody's getting their fair share. And I believe, going back to this conversation that we had last week, is that, like, this whole thing that was going on at the Essence Awards and the BET Awards and all of that, we need to control it. Doesn't mean that we need to stop anybody from saying anything or doing what they do. We're not trying to, stop the freedom of speech and the freedom of expression, but we just have to control where these things are. I really put a lot of the blame, though, on Essence, because Essence did carry themselves a certain way. They carried themselves with a certain level of integrity and all of that. And so why not bring that to your artist? Why not, have your artist bring that to your stage? You know what I'm saying? Like, there was Dr. Carr. I saw Dr. Carr on Karen Hunter's show, and he was talking about he put up a magazine. I forgot if it was Vogue or Bazaar or something like that, but it was one of those classy magazines, and it had Lizzo on the cover. Lizzo was dressed up real nice. Now, we know Lizzo to be showing everything. We know Lizzo to be showing all her stuff. But in the magazine, she was covered up real nice, still sexy and provocative, but covered up nice. You know what I'm saying? They made sure that they represented their magazine properly. So Essence could have represented their show properly. You know what I'm saying? Not have certain things shown. Have Megan Thee Stallion on there, but have her dressed up in something classy. Have her do one of her other songs. There's just certain ways to move this thing around to where we're not just blaming hip hop, and because it's always blaming hip hop, and hip hop has been what it's been. You know what I'm saying? It's always been what it's been. But what's changed is the control of it. We've lost control of what's going on in hip hop. We lost control of what's being brought to the table from the youth, from the elders. We've lost all control. It's all mixed up, and it's all just in your face, and there's no control. There's no scheduling. Back in the days, we had certain times for certain
taking responsibility.
Yeah, we got to be more responsible. You know what I'm saying?
I want us to really
saying that hip hop doesn't have to be responsible also, but I'm just saying in that instance with like Essence Awards and all that, I really put a lot of that on Essence. They could have controlled that situation so it didn't come out the way it did.
I want us to, if we can, make room to talk about that more next week. But one of the things that Jonathan, when he introduced Goke, he talked about merchandising and how important it is. And then Rhino, you come on with your shirt. And so, how do we get a Rhino shirt or a Goke hat? And how involved are you both into merchandising your brand?
Yeah,
I'm
so
still in the beginning stages of mine. I'm not even gonna lie. I gotta press up some new shirts now because I still got old orders from months ago from last year. You know what I'm saying? So I haven't been on top of mine the way I should be. But you know, once I start getting other things rolling the way I wanted to, I'll be on top of the merch a lot more better because you know I'll feel better about putting out my name. You know what I'm saying? When you got something rolling. So that's what it is with me.
So right now in your thing is just you have the Rhino t-shirts right now.
Yes, the
That
Rhino CMZ t-shirts. I want to create some hoodies. I also want to do just CMZ, my DJ name, for
okay.
for people who just dig the the DJ thing and the logo. But yeah, right now that's what it is. It's a Rhino CMZ shirt.
And Goke, what's in your merchandise
yeah, so for him,
closet?
so I already have Hemper of the Heart shirts, and I have like bucket hats like this with all of the. Well, this Goke hat, this is a custom one, but I have bucket hats custom with like all of the song titles.
Wow.
Even if you go to like the Hamper of the Heart, like the actual album cover for like when you listen to it later on like the Spotify Apple Music, the actual album cover was like my sneak peek of like me doing merch because every single song was like put on a piece of clothing inside on my album cover, and all of those pieces of clothing will be available for sale at some point. For this year, I'm probably not going to be selling any merch. I do plan on doing like a free giveaway at the end of the year. But next year is probably when I'm going to start selling merch. So
So real quick,
this year I'm gonna give opportunities to win merch.
Okay.
right.
Next year I'm gonna
That's what's
sell
up.
merch.
That's what's up. Also,
Rhino, you
real
about
quick,
to
I
ask a
wanted to say, also speaking of merch, also go to Manager MAD, that's Manager MAD
Yeah, I was going to ask you that.
at Gmail for that Tame One merch. Rest in peace to my brother Tame One from the Artifacts Boom Squad. We got shirts and posters and hoodies with his artwork on it. He's got like 3 different designs that they're using right now. Definitely go to Manager MAD, that's Manager MAD at gmail.com for that merch.
Say it again.
Manager Manager MAD at Gmail for that Tame
Okay.
One merch. Posters,
And
hoodies, t-shirts, 3 different designs. Go check it out and put your orders in.
can we put that on the page? And Rhino, can you talk to Goke about where we can get his merchandise and also the number one question we always ask?
Oh yeah. Where do you get your merch? Where can people get your merch, okay?
Yeah, like I said, this year you can't get it anywhere. It's only gonna be giveaways. So if you follow me on
Okay.
Instagram,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you can say that.
and you're like active on my page, you'll see opportunities to like win merch right now.
Yeah.
But next year I'm gonna have like a website. I'll probably add it. I have a link tree already on my bio, so I'll probably just add the shop to my link tree, and then from there you'll be able to purchase merch.
Now, is there anybody besides yourself? Because I know you're working on what you're doing. But is there anybody in hip hop that you're rocking with right now?
Oh yeah, there's actually for right now mainly in terms of like my inspiration. Not even so much for the music, but just for what he's doing is La Russell. He's just this guy on the West Coast who's like he created like this new way of I guess interacting with music. First of all of his content is usually just like you pay what you feel. So he throws shows in his backyards, and his tickets are like you name the price. He says you put a price on what you think this experience is going to be. And obviously, he probably started off like not making that much money, but now he's pulling in like probably like 10K or 10K surplus from like shows after everything, and he has like all of the blueprint for everything he does on his Instagram page. It's just like extremely inspirational, especially if you're like an independent artist. He definitely is trying to like lay a new kind of blueprint where you don't need a label, you don't need to sign yourself into like one of those really bad contracts where you need to where you need to like recoup a bunch of money only off album sales or something like that.
Right.
You can generate your own revenue from places like your backyard or just like literally whatever you have access to.
Yeah.
So
Beautiful.
that's like a very inspirational guy right now for me.
Yeah, that's dope. That's dope.
And La Russell is his name. Okay.
Yeah, La Russell.
Right, cool. Well, we are reaching that end of the show, and we had a good show tonight with the Mayor's Forum. We had riveting conversations stemming from that, and our special guest Goke. So just want to thank everybody who came on the show. Anybody want to have any last final words for tonight?
Apologize to everybody that didn't come on.
Right.
His conversation was a very good conversation too, and it led to us just having our own freestyle on a very important subject that we really don't talk about much. That was very good.
Stop beating your kids. Stop beating your kids.
DJ Rhino, did the Sugar Hill Gang make what? Did anybody get
I
that?
didn't go, so I don't know. It was looking like it was raining. It was off and on raining. You know what I'm saying? So I don't even know if that happened. I didn't go, so I'm not even sure if Sugar Hill Gang went.
I want to shout out to the Sugar Hill Gang for showing up in Essex County and bringing that old school flavor back.
Yeah.
All right.
But also tomorrow, check me out. Anybody interested, check me out on Abington Avenue. That's where they got all the graffiti murals and all that stuff going on. Abington Avenue. I'm going to be there between 12 and 4. I'll be DJing out there 12 and 4. The Outsiders, my man Pace One, Young Z, they're going to be there. My man Knowledge Knowledge is going to be there. My man Sun Tzu is going to also be DJing there. So it's going to be a whole bunch of people.
What's the event? What's the event?
Cope Aesthetic. They're going to be performing. Say that again.
What's the event? Who's hosting?
The event is hosted by Brick City Jam. Brick City Jam is hosting it, and it's going to be on Abington Avenue. Avenue.
Rhino.
That's right off of Bloomfield.
I was going to say, Rhino, you should get some of them to come on next week, like just from an 8 to 9, and just
I can actually do that. Yeah, I know. I know a couple of them I can pull.
And the whole 8 to 9 spot.
Yeah. All right. We can work that out.
All right, so that's another week.
And pleasure meeting you.
Pleasure meeting you. Remember, July 27th, Retrospect is being released.
July 27th. All streaming services.
Yeah, all streaming services by next week, Thursday. 12 a.m. on the dot. You'll be able to see it on Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, everything.
All right, I'm looking forward to it, man. And thanks for coming on. And we want to have you back.
Sunday.
Thank you, man. I always love it.
One last plug. Sunday, 2:00. Malcolm X Commemoration Committee is looking at the faith of Malcolm X in the Schomburg. I'm having 2 scholars based at the Schomburg. Aisha Al-Adawiya, who's a pioneer in women's rights in Islam, who's an elder now in her 70s, and a young scholar, Yanis Mahil, who's a scholar in residence at the Schomburg, and a special outlook and up the spotlight on Imam Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, the former A-Trap Brown by none other than Bilal Sunni Ali. It's going to be live on Facebook. Look at our Malcolm X Commemoration Committee Facebook page for the link. Plug in, check it out. Another loaded piece on one of the most sample of all of our revolutionary freedom fighters.
All right, thank you, man. Thank you. All right, until next week, we're